Boop, boop, boop. Here we go. We're streaming. We're here. We're doing it. We're doing it. We're connected. We're here in the world today. Oh, I'm tired, guys. I'm gonna open with a song. Why not? I was just a little boy when my mom and dad divorced. Through my tantrums, cried my tears, I'd keep their vows by force. Now that I'm an older man, I see it had to be this way. My love for them, it keeps on growing each and every day. Time passed me by so swiftly, I could have been a better man. And every day I'm trying to do the best things that I can. And though they're not the people I expected they would be, well, I love them all the same. I just want them to be free. 10 years, me and my wife, we traveled round the globe. Sacred vows and shared regrets, they filled our lives with hope. Then one day she tells me that a man is not for her. Those 10 years are a memory now, but my love for her still stirs. Time passed me by so swiftly, I could have been a better man. And every day I'm trying to do the best things that I can. And though she's not the person I expected she would be, well, I love her all the same. I just want her to be free. My love had a little girl, a scrappy tomboy type. I watched her blossom like a flower, but she felt not quite right. Then one day she tells me she's a young man, not a girl. I picked her up and held her close, then sent my son into the world. And time passed me by so swiftly, I could have been a better man. And every day I'm trying to do the best things that I can. And though he's not the person I expected he would be, well, I love him all the same. I just want him to be free. And though they're not the people I expected they would be, well, I love them all the same. I just want them to be free. Oh, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Content, that's high praise as far as I'm concerned. Matt Crispin's ahead of his time. How you guys doing out there in TikTok land? Hope you guys are all doing well. Oh, glory be and mercy me. A wild Canadian communist appeared. Indeed. Rusty, good to see you, bud. Good to see you. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. I went and celebrated a friend's birthday today. Went and got some spicy wings, which was all very nice, all very well and good. But boy, howdy. Boy, howdy. I'm a burnt out, tired little bunny, I think, like the rest of us. That I just feel like I could sleep for an era, sleep for an age. Sleep, sleep, sleep. And it's getting more and more ridiculous out there, if you ask me. More and more ridiculous. It's a beautiful day, wonderful day to go out for a walk, to walk in the sunlight, do something really useful. Do something useful for yourself, do something useful for your community, do something useful for your nation. Stop participating in the system of capital as much as you possibly can. Go lie down in the grass and stare at the sky. It's a good day for it. It's a good day to get out of your house, to look up at the stars, to think to yourself, why are we here? What are we doing? What is this thing that we are participating in? And to really begin asking serious and intrinsic questions about the nature of our participation in this capitalist system. Should we continue participating in any kind of way that could be considered meaningful? And I'm more or less of the opinion that if you find yourself tied into a job, one of these ridiculous capitalist pursuits, well, I'm here to encourage you to do as little as possible. To forget about your grind set, forget about your, I'll put in all of this effort and work and then my boss will recognize me and I'll get all the adulation and all that kind of stuff. I'm here to tell you that you should put in the absolute barest of minimums, because this capitalist system is attempting to extract as much wealth as it possibly can out of you and then abandon you. And there's absolutely no reason to participate in this to any degree outside of what is absolutely necessary. And to those of you who are walking around talking about how this is a voluntary system, I think you've just drank the Kool-Aid, that you're just part of a cult. You've just decided to believe in something that is verifiably false. You are free to work or starve. And in such an arrangement, no man can be free. No man can be free. That we should actually be living plumb crazy. I'm not just going to say yes to that, all right? If you want to have a real conversation with me, you can go on over to YouTube. It's in the description, right? I'm talking to my YouTube chat just over here. Hope you guys are all doing really well out there. I do that by choice, just so you know. Capitalism created everything you own. That is absolutely false. Workers created everything I own. That workers are responsible for creating your iPhone. Workers are responsible for creating your computer. Workers are responsible for planting your crops. Workers are responsible for harvesting those crops and distributing those crops. What capitalists do is they take the surplus value of all of that labor and they keep it for themselves. And they go and do things like buy Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. That's what the capitalists are doing, right? So this claim that you have said that capitalism is responsible for creating everything that I own is verifiably false. You can take a look on the back of any package. Anything that says made in a place, well, it wasn't capitalists that made that. Capitalists extract value from workers. That's what they're there to do. That's how the system is structured. That capitalism creates nothing. That capitalism is a force that destroys. It's not a force that creates. And we're going to see that very obviously in short order. In short order. So let's focus perhaps on a couple of quick articles that we have out here. I might actually read this one, you know. I haven't read an article out loud in quite some time because I've been so bloody exhausted. But this is from Linda McQuaig. And Linda McQuaig is a powerful ally. This article is named Ontario's Shift to Private Healthcare Will Cost Much, Much More. It baffles me the way some political developments turn into scandals while others clearly scandalous developments turn out to be political nothing burgers. Take, for instance, dramatic new numbers showing that privatized healthcare is more expensive than public healthcare. Not just by a little bit, but wildly more expensive. This has all the makings of a scandal, particularly in Ontario, where Premier Doug Ford has been barreling forward with plans to significantly increase healthcare privatization, plans he never revealed before his re-election last year. There's fresh evidence why these plans are terrible. Quebec government data released in April shows that surgeries at private clinics consistently cost the government more, often more than twice as much. And a May 12th CBC report revealed that our public hospitals, increasingly forced to rely on nurses supplied by private agencies, are paying those agencies up to 8 times the going rate. Let's just consider the folly of the nursing situation. Imagine that there are 2 nurses. Nurse 1, employed in the emergency department of Toronto General Hospital, earns only $37.10 an hour, despite working under often grueling conditions. This is the actual median wage for registered nurses at hospitals in Toronto's University Health Network. The Ford government has blocked Nurse One from winning a higher wage by capping nurses' wage hikes at 1% a year since 2019, even as inflation soared above 7%. One might conclude the Ford government is simply determined to keep nursing costs low, but that's not really the case, which brings us to Nurse 2. This second nurse became so disheartened by Ford's low pay and dismissive treatment that he quit his hospital job and now works for a private nursing agency at roughly double the pay. Lots of other nurses have followed his path, leaving our hospitals seriously short-staffed and obliged to hire nurses from private agencies. Taking full advantage of the hospital's desperation, the agencies jack up the price. At crunch times, their rates go as high as $300 an hour, costing the hospital, ultimately the government, about 8 times what it pays Nurse One for the same work. Most of this excess pay ends up in the hands of the private agencies, which, as middlemen, are scooping up tens of millions of dollars of public money. This reckless use of public money could be avoided if the government simply paid Nurse One a reasonable wage. Ford's refusal to do this suggests he has an agenda that has nothing to do with good governance. Rather, he seems motivated to crush the nurses, along with all other public sector workers struggling to catch up after 3 years of being held to a 1% wage cap. Although the cap was struck down by the courts last fall, the government is still appealing that decision and fighting to maintain the cap. In addition to trouncing public sector unions, Ford appears keen to undermine the public health care, thereby smoothing the way for more privatization. Certainly, he seems fixated on privatization and promoting private business interests. He doesn't seem to understand that as premier, his job is to protect the public, which includes shielding our valued public programs from pillaging by private businesses, whose only concern is making a buck. Ford and his ministers, steeped in their stag and doe ways, seem unaware that they are elected to be guardians of the public interest. Even writing that, I realize how ridiculous it sounds in their case. In the legislature, Health Minister Sylvia Jones appears unable to coherently defend healthcare privatization, lapsing into corporate pep talk that innovation is not a bad word. Of course, innovation isn't bad. Indeed, it's good. What's bad is the way Jones and the rest of the Ford government use quote-unquote innovation as a cover for crushing workers and channeling public funds to private interests. That's not innovation. It's a betrayal of their role as public guardians. And in any reasonable political universe, that would be a scandal. Like, who's defending this system anymore? Right? Who's defending this system anymore? Who are the people out in the world who are actually actively working to defend this system at this stage in the game? Like, we literally have outright parasites. People who, capitalism is a blood-sucking parasite. People who literally are worthless, pathetic middlemen, siphoning as much money away from people who need it into their own pockets, and then just dupes. At this point, Conton writes, "Goddamn, Canadians thinking private healthcare is good and has an empirical example of the issues of it, and they still want it, is just unbelievable and frankly amazing." Yeah. I mean, to me, there is a significant decline happening. That one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is that the decline is not simply that the ruling class are working to line their own pockets. It's that there has been a cultural decline. That we've been rendered sort of stupefied, frankly. That the culture is more or less babyish. I was talking about this just today with my friend, that back in the 90s, Disney was fine because it was a small portion of the cultural media that we absorbed. And film and television that came out there was an array going from fairly adult down to childish, which is Disney. Well, now Disney owns like 80% of the market. And so what has happened to our culture because of it? It's become childish. That everything has to go through this incredibly tiny, childish lens of Disney. And we're not actually permitted to have serious adult conversations in the world because most of our media is owned by children's storyteller. This has made us incredibly childish, that we are not actually capable of viewing our leaders, our systems critically. That we have I keep describing it as the phase that we are in is the "but daddy wouldn't lie" phase of capitalism. That there is this sort of wakening up that is happening, but the people who are still bought in to the idea that capitalism has any value are just basically children who have been Disneyfied, who are shaking their heads going, "but daddy wouldn't lie." And the answer to that is, of course daddy would lie. Daddy's a barbaric thug that's gone around the world destroying everybody and stealing their resources. The reason why you have the things you have is because daddy's been killing people for money, for it. And you're now just waking up to the reality of it. And it won't be too much longer till daddy takes the belt to you. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're faced up against. And the people who are still defending this system routinely embarrass themselves. And all you have to do to watch a capitalist embarrass themselves is ask them for sources for the information that they send out. You want to see an embarrassing display? You can ask literally just from like a TikTok influencer all the way up to a Harvard professor. They'll make a claim and you can simply ask them for the sources of that information, and they'll literally give you like real estate agents doing census shifting to prove their already preconceived points. They'll literally give you just word vomit nonsense blather of a song and dance to completely justify their own position in the first place. Like, if you want to, a very clear example, if you want to make the claim that the USSR massacred a bunch of people, well, you know who you should go talk to is the people who they massacred, right? The governments that were in power, the governor of the place that they destroyed. But they don't do that. They never do that. Their sources is always just, well, we opened up the census and we saw that this number was down a little bit, and so we assume that that was just a massacre. It's that kind of nonsense that we get. Because capitalists can't defend themselves anymore. They don't actually have positions. If they can't look up sources for themselves, then I'm not helping anyone. I did my research. I mean, but we have to consistently do that. If we're going to be leftists, if we're going to be communists, it's as Thomas Sankara said, we have to continuously explain and explain again and continuously do it. Because the right is more than willing to explain its position, as ridiculous as it is, as childish as it actually is. But, and if we're not willing to do the same, right? If we're not willing to do the same, then we're going to get beat. We're going to get beat bad. Cotton says, you know, John is right about this whole Disneyfication of media culture. Yep, John is often right. I watched a video essay of Dread 3D and was reminded that we don't have movies like that too much that comes to high regard. But they actually spelled out how brilliant Dread talked about social issues and the effects of what happens to law enforcement and what makes them into... Wow. Oh, yeah. Slovenia, I believe, just went ahead and said the Holodomor was real. Madness. Well, the Holodomor is a real, like, it's just a political thing, right? Like, if you say the Holodomor was real, then you're against Russia. It's as simple as that. That if you refuse to acknowledge it, then you're not necessarily aligned with Russia, but you're not against Russia. Whereas if you say that it is, then you're against Russia. And that's basically the long and short of it. Like, it doesn't matter what's real in the conversation. It's clearly just a political token. It's clearly just being used as political tokenism. And so you can basically just say what you like about it, because no one actually provides sources for anything that they say. Nobody actually provides any information for what they say. You could just say that it's real. And so it's very much how, like, Christians talk about how they love Jesus. You know, they don't care about Christ. They don't care about anything he said. They don't follow his teachings. They don't do anything he said to do. They're certainly not interested in anything that he had to say. But if they say that they love Jesus and then somebody else says that they love Jesus, then they're like, okay, good, we're of a mind, right? Then we're on the same team. And the Holodomor has become exactly that for liberals. Just, okay, good. Then we're both against Russia. Good. Then we understand. It's become like a shorthand rather, for everybody. And it doesn't matter what's real. Like, these people are not interested in what's real, right? Yeah, another Eastern European country looking to jerk the Anglo-led West off. Yeah, as always. Yeah, exactly. When you provide the sources, they don't look anyway and still act like it's BS. Here's what happens, Karma's Fist. Here's what happens. I'm gonna push back on you here because I understand where you're coming from, right? I understand where you're coming from. You're coming from a place of deep frustration. You're coming from a place of deep angst and a sense of hopelessness, right? I understand that it seems like you're screaming against a brick wall. Well, here's what does happen. Here's the story that I'll iterate to you. When I was growing up, I continuously, especially after the Iraq War, I continuously found myself saying to the people around me, you know, this is exactly how the Nazis acted on the lead up to World War II. This is exactly what happened in Germany. Like, this is exactly what happened. And eventually my friends told me to shut up about it, right? Because they just got frustrated with me, constantly bringing up the analogies between what was happening in our own culture and what happened on the lead up to World War II. And that happened for a little while, and I kind of bought into that because, you know, I'm a young man, right? I'm susceptible to peer pressure. But I continued writing about it. I didn't bother them with it any longer. But I continued to write about it. I found my own outlets for it and all of that kind of stuff, and they went their own way and all this. Well, then one day Donald Trump got elected. Right? Donald Trump got elected. And when that happened, a lot of the people who told me, oh, John, especially through the Obama years, right? Oh, John, everything's fine, right? Racism is over now, Obama, right? Well, when Donald Trump got elected, suddenly I'm the guy. Suddenly I got a lot of these same people turning and looking at me saying, hey, what do you think about that, John? What do you think's going on, John? Because what is happening is that it is becoming every day, every single day, it is becoming more and more obvious that America is collapsing into a fascist state. And every day it's becoming more and more obvious that right now it might be very obvious to you, just like how it was obvious to me when I was in my 20s post the Iraq War. Well, it's not obvious to everyone else because everyone else is living their own life. And not everybody else is spending their time delving into history. Not everybody else is spending their time delving into philosophy. Not everybody else is spending their time delving in to the reading required to stay abreast of all of this kind of stuff. That most people are just living their lives and are just trying to get through and don't really want to believe that their country is as bad as the Nazis ever were. They don't want to believe that. They want to believe that what they're doing is for the greater good of human civilization. Well, it's getting more and more obvious by the day that that is not the case. And there will come a moment when the people who you are speaking with, when the people who you are talking with, when the people who are around you, there is going to be a moment where it becomes so obvious that they're going to turn to you and they're going to say, hey, about this thing that's happening, that's so obvious. You seem to understand what's going on. Can we talk about it? What do you think's happening? What can we do about it? What should we do about it? And so keep talking. Keep expressing it. Because you're going to have little breakthrough moments. You're going to have little breakthrough things. And when the people around you see that what you've been saying is correct, and it becomes too obvious, and the empire's mask slips off too much for them, and when the negative consequences of the actions of the empire begin to affect them, That's the real turning point. The real turning point is when the negative consequences of the empire begin to affect them. That as long as it's not affecting them, they can basically ignore it. And you're just a kooky person talking about, you might as well be talking about Star Wars, as far as they're concerned, right? But when it starts to affect them, when they see it in their day-to-day life, and more it's going to get obvious, as it's obvious to many of us, as it's obvious to millions of people. Like 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Most people can't withstand a $1,000 emergency. The extraction of wealth during the COVID period is in orders of trillions of dollars. It has become extraordinarily obvious to huge sections of the populace. But the tipping point for millions more people, of the people who are still bought into the idea that the system of capital actually has credibility, the tipping point will be the collapse of the dollar. That once the dollar actually collapses, once the dollar actually declines and America no longer has dollar hegemony, it will be too obvious to ignore, which is why the ruling class is creating counter-narratives now. Getsu, good to see you, bud. By then, isn't it too late to do a U-turn? It is already too late to do a U-turn. It is too late. The game that we are playing right now is not Save America. That is not the game that we are playing. And we should do away with this idea. In fact, we should be widely and loudly proclaiming death to America. That America as an idea was erected by monarchists and slavers in order to maintain the power of the monarchy and slavery. That Canada and America were erected on those principles and have been operating on those principles this whole time. What will cause a USD collapse? So, David, that's a wonderful question. So, I really strongly advise that everybody go take a look at an organization called BRICS. This is an economic coalition between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia. And that the goal of this organization is for these countries to trade with one another off of the dollar, and and multiple countries, basically most of the world's population, is going to begin trading in currencies that are off of the world's dollar, off of the world dollar. Oh, look at the Z. Is it not Saudi Arabia? It's South Africa. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that, bud. Saudi Arabia, I believe, is applying to join BRICS. That's correct. I think you're correct. So this organization, which is most of the world's population as well as most of the world's manufacturing, is going to be trading off of the dollar and is essentially turning to America and saying, what is it that you produce exactly? What is it that you make exactly? What is it that you do exactly? What is it that you put into the world? And the answer is simply war and bombs. And most of the rest of the world's not buying it anymore. So what America is looking at is a situation where they're taking their dollars that they have printed and are saying, can we get stuff for it? And the rest of the world is saying, no, thank you. This is going to cause a plummeting of the dollar, a massive drop in the dollar that we are not prepared for. It is going to be different than other collapses. It's going to be different than the dot-com collapse or the 2008 housing market collapse. It's going to be different. And we don't have an answer. We don't have an answer. Inflation is only sort of part of it, because inflation is basically just corporations jacking prices on you and blaming it on like, oh, there's forces in the world. And the reality is that they're just jacking prices on you because they want to. Big, robust conversation about whether or not Canada is still part of the monarchy. I mean, Canada has a tradition of being part of the monarchy. We're an independent nation, that the monarchy doesn't actually make any decisions on our behalf, but we are part of the Commonwealth. And so there are still agreements that we abide by in order to maintain our position within the Commonwealth nations. And so that's like an old set of alliances that don't really, like, it plays to a degree, but it doesn't play within the national tenor of decision making. Like, the Queen of England, or the King of England at this point, I guess, the King of England is not going to stand up and tell Canada to do something. Now, that's not to say that the throne doesn't have some kind of prestige and some kind of authority, but that authority is not legislative. Yep, recession worldwide is coming back. Absolutely. Conton says, oh yeah, Nebraska condemned queer Nebraskans to extreme medical danger by one vote. Yeah, I know someone in Nebraska, and so I'm sure I'll be talking with her about that. Like, what is so foolish to me about what is happening throughout the United States? It's like they need to learn this lesson over and over and over and over and over again. What's wild to me is that it's the very people who say that they don't want state interference and they want small government, they don't want the states to intervene, but when it comes to trans rights, the state definitely needs to be involved. When it comes to abortion rights, the state definitely needs to be involved. So they're hypocrites to the highest possible degree. They don't actually believe anything they say, which is not surprising because they don't actually believe in the Bible they hold. That this attack against trans people has always been bigotry, and nothing but bigotry. That their concerns are not serious. They don't actually care, right? They care as much about this issue as they care about their Christ, which is not at all. And so I'm not surprised to see that they're launching such an attack. It's important to remember that when Hitler and the Nazis went after the gay community, they started with trans people. And this will spread. This will spread. There's no stopping it at this point. That the culture is too far gone. The corporate power structure understands that it is better to fund these sorts of movements and clog the legislatures with this sort of legislation than to have a meaningful conversation about the credibility of the corporate state, which it has no credibility. That what we should be discussing right now, and what any reasonable, rational people would be discussing right now, is whether or not our ruling structure and our ruling principles have credibility. And the reason why we need to clog the legislature with as much anything other than that rhetoric is because the power structure doesn't want to have that conversation. Because it can't defend itself. Because it understands that it's lost all credibility. And how does it know this? The entire rest of the world community is saying that they no longer have any credibility. Openly, constantly. Every single interview that I have seen where the BBC goes and talks to an African nation or an Indian nation or an Indian province or someone, that you walk away from the interview realizing in a profound and deep way that the rest of the world does not give two shits what we think. The rest of the world does not care even a tiny little bit about the opinion of America, Canada, Australia, or Europe. That they look at us with our condescension and our attitude of how dare you do this, and they laugh at us and say, what are you even talking about? Like, you guys are invading countries and destroying places and robbing people. You've lost your minds and you've gone crazy. Give me one reason why we should listen to a word you have to say. I watched one interview recently where a BBC journalist was interviewing, I believe it was the leader of Kenya. And the leader of Kenya basically turned the journalist into a sputtering baby, simply by saying your invasion of Iraq was one of the largest war crimes that has happened in the century. How dare you even begin to talk to me about whether or not what we are doing has any validity while you're walking into nations and destroying them with no evidence and lying to the world about it, which is exactly what's happening. So now we're really entering a phase where the entire rest of the world, and this assault against trans people plays completely, that the entire rest of the world is looking at us as if we have lost our minds. And the answer is, we have. We have. We have lost our minds. Ligon Z, once again, that was South Africa. Thank you, Ligon Z. So not the leader of Kenya, the leader of South Africa. Thank you for the correction, bud. I appreciate it. Ligon Z, you're on me today. I appreciate it, bud. Keep me honest. Keep me honest. I appreciate it. Why can't we, the people, become parliament and run the country with a full vote system on every subject? Yeah, sure. Certainly we could. Right? We would have to overthrow the current system in order to do so. Right? Because the current system is not designed to do that. It's not designed that way. The system that we have here in Canada was designed to maintain the monarchy. That it was designed to maintain the power of the monarchy. When we voted for our independence, we essentially took the power of the monarchy and put it into the Prime Minister's office. And so it essentially became the power of the capitalists. In the United States, the system is explicitly designed to be run by the wealthy. That I think the biggest indicator of this was James Madison himself, the framer of the Constitution, who said that the Senate should be held by the wealth of the nation. That the system is not designed to respond to anything other than the wealthy, with the idea being that the wealthy will never vote their wealth away. Why can't we vote someone in Parliament to make it happen? I mean, you're welcome to try, but there are a lot of impediments. There are a lot of hurdles. And the first hurdle that I would say is that politicians are easy to bribe. They're cheap. And you don't need to bribe them by walking into their office with a suitcase full of money. That you as a billionaire can just throw a party and invite them and show them your wealth and your power and prestige, and then shake their hand and say, I look forward to working with you. Right? And then you're bought in. Because you're not going to fight back against someone who has the overwhelming wealth that the billionaire class has. Right? You want to be part of that class. And it's easy to buy you because you are so cheap. Right? And so here's the other part of it then, Karmas. Right? It's not easy to bribe when I see no value in money. Yeah. So let's say you get somebody like that, who's actually beginning to ascend the power structure, who's actually beginning to climb the power structure, who the billionaire class sees as a threat. They will shoot you. I don't understand why we're pretending that's not going to happen. They will have you taken out. You'll have an accident. Suddenly you'll get cancer young and die, right? Because they'll shoot you with the cancer gun. The ways of killing opposition are thick and really obvious, right? And really out there. For goodness sakes, you could take a look at Clara Sorrenti, for example, right? Clara Sorrenti lived in London, Ontario, had her door kicked in by cops, right? She's a former member of the Communist Party, a trans advocate, and cops have been kicking in her door, harassing her. She had to flee Canada for a period of time. She's constantly been moving around because people have been harassing her. This is what it actually means to be an advocate for something that is off step with the core of the belief system of the imperial state. That the major trouble that we are facing, is that fascism is extremely popular. Fascism is an extremely popular ideology and an extremely popular belief system that most people to some degree, operate through some kind of fascist principle. That we genuinely believe. And you can see people openly talking about how, like, the whole grind set narrative, the entire grind set narrative is fascist. That the idea is that you as an individual are a hero of your own narrative and you can author your own fate. This narrative was very popular amongst the Nazis. It's incoherent nonsense, of course, because if the universe wants to crush you, it will. And there's nothing you can do about it. And it doesn't make you a bad person for having experienced it. It just means that you got in the way of a tidal wave. Turner K, don't know if I've ever seen you in my YouTube chat before, bud. Do you believe we currently live in a fascist state with Trudeau at the helm? So let me be extremely clear. Trudeau is a liberal. Like, he's of the Liberal Party. He is a liberal. Lowercase l liberal. Liberals bend the knee to fascists. They don't stand up to fascists. They pretend as though they care about getting in the way of fascists, but when the fascists seize power, liberals bend the knee, because liberals bend the knee to power. We are not in a fascist state because we haven't gotten that to that degree. Culturally, though, we are a very fascist people. We don't believe in collective good. We don't believe in working together. We definitely believe that if you are failing, it is your fault. We don't acknowledge the existence of systems or history. We have fallen into a kind of a type of theocracy. For goodness sakes, I say that capitalism is a death cult. Because the system that we actually operate under, the principles that we actually operate under are threefold that I have seen. The first is the worship of money, that we worship money first and foremost. Money matters more than your friendships. It matters more than your own life. It matters more than clean drinking water. It matters more than your children. It matters more than anything else. We as Westerners are willing to destroy literally anything and everything for money. And we know for a fact that the wealthiest people in our society are treasonous, treacherous betrayers and slavers, and yet we adulate them anyway. So we worship money completely. Number two is the worship of the self, right? This is your Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder nonsense that fundamentally says a single individual is more powerful than every other individual that currently exists and ever did exist, than any institution that does exist or ever did exist, and hysterically is more powerful than the forces of the universe themselves. That this statement of self-worship combines itself with the worship of money so that you get statements like, well, I have money, so I must be good. And you don't have money, therefore you must be bad. And you've done something bad, so that's why you're poor, and you just need to money up, and then you'll be good, like me. It's a self-reinforcing belief system. And then finally, the third pillar of it all, that ties it all together and binds it, is the worship of ignorance. And this worship of ignorance allows the believer of the death cult to simply ignore evidence to the contrary. To simply ignore facts, ignore the fact that all of us are in fact randomly generated people, to simply ignore history, to ignore the existence of institutions, to ignore evidence sources, to ignore everything, because I'm rich, therefore I'm good, is good enough. This is the belief system that is going to lead us into a fascist state. That the people who hold these beliefs, who essentially believe themselves to be divine beings, are actually going to eventually seize power and use that power violently against the people in order to maintain it. Turner says, so individuality, personal property, money, and selfishness are fascist ideologies. I mean, they are part of fascism without a doubt. Like, the privatization of public resources was first done in Germany under Adolf Hitler. The privatization as a model is a Nazi ideology. It's a thing the Nazis did, and and let's be very specific that no one is saying you shouldn't have your own individual freedom or your own individuality. It's the worship of the individual, making the individual more important than the whole. Making it so that the individual is the only thing that matters and that there is no such thing as a collective good. And of course, selfishness. I mean, yeah. Like, selfishness is a negative. It's not something that we should be pursuing. It's not something we should be interested in. This adulation of selfishness that exists and persists in the society is very dark. I find it to be very dark. Like, it's very scary sort of a thing. And again, it's not money itself, it's the worship of money. It's the worship of money. That's what we're talking about. Like, if we actually treated money for what it is, which is just paper that we print, and it's a tool, and we could print it, destroy it, move it around, whatever, but it's the worship of it itself. But doesn't fascism center around state-controlled autocracy of public resources and industries? That fascism works on behalf of the industry. Like, Hitler doesn't rise to power because he's a good speaker. He rises to power because he has the backing of heavy industry. Because Hitler promised those industries that he would go after their primary enemies, which is socialists and communists. Which it's the first thing Hitler did. The first concentration camps were communist concentration camps. It wasn't Jewish concentration camps; it was communist concentration camps. And and so what it actually is, and Mussolini said it very clearly, is that it's the merger of state power with corporate power. That Mussolini said that fascism is better called corporatism, because it's the merger of state power and business and corporate power. And so if it's merged, if industry has merged with the state, then it doesn't matter which side of the coin owns it. Because if the state owns it but the industry is the one that gets all the benefit, well, then it doesn't matter if the industry owns it and is regulated by the state, but the industry gets all the benefit. It's just the same. It's two different ways to describe the same phenomenon, because the state and the state and industry has merged. So in today's lingo, when you see something like private-public partnerships, when you've got people like Justin Trudeau, like Pierre Poilievre, like Stephen Harper, saying words like, "Oh, this is going to be a public-private partnership." Well, what is that except the merger of the business class with the state? That we should be very, very skeptical when privately held corporations are interested in merging with state apparatus, which is precisely what is happening. Turner says, I would argue that it works for the benefit of the state or quote-unquote race in which the dictatorial leader deems as the desirable nation. I don't think I understand your statement, mate. I would argue that it works for the benefit of the state. I don't know why we're bringing race into it, in which the dictatorial leader deems as the desirable nation. I mean, I suppose with the Aryan nation, sure. I would argue it works for the benefit of the state or race in which the... Look, fascism always operates for the benefit of the people funding it. And that's the industry. That's corporate power. Very straightforwardly. Tesco says, we are kind of heading down this route given the WEF's stakeholder capitalism. Yeah, I mean, they keep talking about a kinder, friendlier capitalism, and we should reform capitalism, as if such a thing is possible, right? That all they're trying to do is buy time and keep you on your couches watching porn. That's all they're trying to do. Omnicidal tendencies and going off altruistic Kantian belief that the good of the collective over individuals is just as toxic, if not worse. I mean, that is certainly a concern, but I would argue that giving people access to food and shelter and giving people access to basic goods such as healthcare, right, increases their individual freedom, doesn't remove it. There's sort of an odd idea that happens on the right that what is being argued for is an elimination of individuality, which is just not what's being discussed at all. Like, it's not even part of the discussion. C.R. Strifey says people are motivated by self-interest. Sure. Any curtailing of that requires either dictatorship of some kind of unlikely enlightened altruism that isn't natural. I mean, so this is the capitalism is human nature argument, right? So, like, why do we have laws? Why are there any laws, right? Like, people are motivated by, so people are selfish, like, naturally, so we shouldn't pass any law or have any expectation of curtailing that at all. So, like, me wanting to go and steal something is perfectly natural, so why should that be a problem, right? Like, Ted Bundy could stand up and say, well, I was motivated by self-interest and I was successful. What's the problem? The free market decided they should have defended themselves better. You know what they needed is that they needed a good guy with a gun. Like, this entire argument is actually extraordinarily dark. And incidentally, part of the culture of fascism that I talk about. That it's extremely creepy and weird that a guy like Bill Maher is standing up and saying out loud in front of everyone, capitalism is human nature, therefore nothing can be done about it. That's extremely dark. That's an extremely dark argument that takes you down an extraordinarily dark rabbit hole. That if we are just going to cede ourselves, if we're just going to cede everything to, oh, well, it's just human nature, then why pass any laws at all? Why have a single law, right? It is simply might makes right then, isn't it? It's just, oh, well, I've got the bigger guns, I'm bigger and stronger, and you're going to do what I say or I'm going to blow you up, and that's fine because that's human nature, isn't it? So why write the Magna Carta, right? Why write any of these documents whatsoever? Why have a situation? Like, why put anything on paper at all and expect anybody to follow them whatsoever or have any set of expectations on humanity? Timothy, good to see you. There was a good recent 60 Minutes article on price gouging in the Pentagon. Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't they? Right? Why wouldn't they? Kantian, yeah. These anti-collectivists, expletive, let's say. Can we move at least 1 inch towards the greater good? Can we do that? Or is everyone being able to eat just a panopticon, yeah? Turner says, because we as a people decided that a common set of ground rules would allow us to have the required trust to engage in free market transaction, would be your rebuttal. And I think that that's just delusional, Turner. Like, I don't mean to be rude, but that's not what's happening at all. The idea that people are voluntarily engaging in a free market is delusional. That if people do not sell themselves to the market, they starve and are homeless. That means that what is happening is coercion. That the idea that what is happening is voluntary is foolish. That you simply find yourself in a position where you are comfortable with what is happening. You're just comfortable in the position that you have. And you are fine with what's going on. You've decided that this is good enough for you. And you're just going to move forward in the position that you have. Well, if you're living in a situation where the exploitation is dramatic, where people are abusing their power, because all of these businesses are dictatorships, they're structured as top-down tyrannical dictatorships, and if the owners of these top-down tyrannical dictatorships abuse you, well, you're free to quote-unquote go get another job, but if there isn't another job to be had, then you're free to go into the streets and starve. There's no voluntary connection happening under capitalism. It's just not real. It's just not what's happening. C.R. Strifey says, law is a perfect point because it's what allows us to live as a society. But when you ask people to put aside their own self-interest and pursue a collective goal, you're asking for a lot. But sure, sure you're asking for a lot, but we've done it. This is the part about this conversation I find to be so strange. So we've already done it several times. It's not like we're asking for a miracle. It's not like we're standing up and saying, oh, Jesus Christ, come and raise the dead. Within living memory, we erected a universal healthcare system. Countries across the world are constantly acting on collective good. Why are we erecting a philosophy that says outright and explicitly that we shouldn't attempt to pursue things that are for the collective good? I find that to be very creepy. I find that to be very strange. That if you want to stand up and say, oh, sure, we should be pursuing things for the collective good, but I want to be sure that it is for the collective good, and negotiate and debate what you believe to actually be for the collective good, that's one thing. But that's not the conversation we're having. The conversation we're actually having is whether or not we should even attempt to do things for the collective good. I find that to be very strange. I find that to be a very strange society that stands up and actually says, you know what we should do is abandon one another. That you just need to work harder. Sure, the system's collapsing. Sure, there's all the evidence in the world for the fact that we're being abandoned. But you just need to grind set. That if I were to use an analogy for what is actually happening in this society, it is as if we are on a boat that has capsized, tossed many people into the ocean, and that we have righted the boat, and now from the boat we are pointing at the people in the ocean saying, swim harder, swim harder. And then when they drown, we just shrug and go, oh well, they just needed to swim harder. Meanwhile, we're surrounded by lifeboats and all of the stuff we need to get them out of the water. So I find this to be extremely concerning, that we are actually needing to justify the idea that we should live in a society that wants to move forward for the collective good. I find that to be very odd that we have to actually defend that idea. Which is why I say the society is widely fascist. Because fascists want to purge the society of the groups they don't deem worthy to survive, which is basically everyone else. Compton says the philosophical cowardice people have because they're so afraid to try to make something where people are maybe just okay. Yeah. How dare we expect people to have access to food and shelter, right? How dare we? How dare we think that people who are randomly generated into the world with a necessity for food and shelter should simply have access to that without having it withheld? I think that that's extremely strange. Oh, Florida's bad, Scott. Florida's real bad. My heart to you, my friend. My heart to you. Yeah, you deserve company towns. Exactly, Compton. Mr. Moon writes, if capitalism is human nature, why is there an epidemic of mental illness? Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Baked potato. Hey, John. No see. No long, no blah, blah. I understand what you mean, baked potato, and I'm stumbling myself. Glad you're still fighting the good fight. Yeah, me too, baked potato. I could be sleeping right now, honestly. I'll be honest with you, baked potato. I'm quite burnt out. I'm not going to be able to stream tomorrow because of the demands of the capitalist job. But it's going to ease up, and it's going to ease up soon. I'm actually considering starting to rent out part of my apartment for Airbnb, just as a way to make a little bit more money. We'll see how it all goes. Grinning. I love talking my frustration out on the boomers, or taking my frustration, talking. It's probably counterproductive, but the catharsis is fun. Yeah, honestly, Grinning, at this stage in the game, if you're talking to somebody who's over the age of 80 and they still are actually bought in on this shit, you can basically just say what you like to them as far as I'm concerned, right? They'll be dead soon. Right? One of the things that really keeps me going, one of the things that I always need to remind myself when I get into my darkest hours is I really do want to see what this world looks like without the boomers in it. That we all are going to have the privilege of living in a world without the boomers. And we're all going to be able to talk to one another without having this asinine, annoying group that are constantly talking this narcissistic, delusional game. That they'll be gone. They'll be completely gone. And as far as I'm concerned, if they're going to stand there and try to tell me how great they are and how much I suck, then you can say what you like to them. My human nature is constantly telling me that capitalism is evil and fucked. Yeah. Turner, no, I'm not saying that, but we live on a floating rock, hurtling through space. There we can finally something we can agree on, Turner, and are simply trying to survive. I mean, we have everything we need. People need to make the stuff we use to function. Capitalism accomplish that. I would argue that it's not capitalism that accomplishes that. Workers accomplish that. That capitalists take the surplus value of workers and extract it for themselves. That's what capitalists are doing. That it's the workers that are making all of that stuff. It's the workers that build the building. It's the workers that maintain those buildings. It's the workers that grow the food. It's the workers that distribute the food. The capitalists sit in rooms doing nothing, smoking cigars, talking about how great they are because their daddy gave them free stuff. Like, that's what's actually going on, right? That we're not here because of the greatness of the capitalist mind. We're here because working people worked and created things that capitalists then exploit and withhold for their own benefit. That we would be better off by ridding ourselves of these worthless parasites who hoard resources away from the populace for their own benefit and go ahead and use them to buy things like Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Like, we would be better off without these people. That's my entire argument. Content, my human nature is to just let the enlightened centrist idiots just learn the hard way and let corporate iron fist pummel them into Soylent. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people are just not going to learn, right? They're just not. Like, that's the hard truth, is that there's a lot of people who are just going to experience the whip and say, thank you, sir, can I have another? Baked potato, if we still had the capitalism of the 60s, would you still support this system? So the capitalism of the 60s was a whipped capitalism, right? That post-World War II, the New Deal legislation came in because the capitalists were so terrified of an overthrow of the system of capital. Like, FDR didn't pass the New Deal because he was a good man. FDR passed the New Deal because he was looking outside of his window at communists, socialists, and labor unionists calling for the overthrow of the capitalist system. And so what he did was concessions bargaining. This is essentially how you end up with your social democracies, right? The capitalists concede power in order to maintain control of the means of production. That the mistake that the communists, the socialists, and the labor unionists made, the mistake that they made, was that they allowed the capitalists to still hold on to the means of production. So they accepted the concessions bargaining, they accepted what they got, and they walked away, and they lived the life that they lived throughout the 60s and 70s. But the capitalists, in very short order, have dismantled the New Deal and have gotten very good at dismantling legislation such as New Deal legislation. So the next time we're in a position where the halls of power are surrounded and the ruling class is attempting to do concessions bargaining, we shouldn't fall for it. We should overthrow them. We should not accept any concessions from them. We should redraw the Constitution and remove them from influence and power completely. We should make it impossible for capitalists to interact with the political system entirely. In fact, we should make it a crime. Mr. Moon, capitalism has fuck all to do with free markets. It had to do with capitalists controlling the state. Yeah, that's that's exactly right. Hence bailouts, lobbying, corporate personhood, etc. Oh, and to put a pin in it, baked potato, would I still support the capitalism of the 60s? No. Because I would understand that capitalism is a snake eating its own tail. That even though we got those concessions, I would understand that it would still seek to destroy itself. Because that's what capitalism always does and will always continue to do. Turner says stuff needs to be made. Yep, by workers. People need to make it. Workers, yeah, and the workers should be the beneficiaries of that. Capitalism is free choice whether to participate in that structure. What a joke! Like, what a total joke! Like, workers starve. Socialism is where you are forced, where you participate in the same structure. Like, you've inverted it. I don't understand why capitalists do this. I don't understand why people do this. You've literally inverted the definitions. That under the capitalist system, there is a class of owners who own everything. In our society, it's BlackRock and Vanguard are the primary organizations that own most of everything in the society. You have the choice in capitalism to work for them or starve. That's the choice that you're given. And you're just falling for the fact that, oh, well, that door is red and that door is blue. Well, that door is red and that door is blue, but both are owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. So you're working for the same guy no matter what you do, experiencing the same shitty conditions, the same shitty wages, and the same shitty treatment wherever you go. And your choice is to engage with that or starve. That's the capitalist system. And if you say anything other than that, I think you're completely, utterly deluded. Like flat earther level, hyper deluded, like raving, foaming at the mouth, as far as I'm concerned. Socialism is where you're forced to participate in the same structure. Socialism is where workers, the people who do the work, who actually go to a place and do something of value, unlike what the capitalists do, actually get the benefits of their own labor and their own work. That the highest level of socialism is that workers own the means of production. That's the whole idea of socialism. That workers go to a building where there's manufacturing done and they actually own it. They own the enterprise. Is that happening under capitalism? Do you see much of that going on in capitalism? Of course you don't. So I would say to you that you need to restructure how you actually think about these things because you've completely inverted it, which is common. I commonly see people say socialism is bad because, and then they describe capitalism perfectly. It's unbelievable to watch. I don't understand why people do it. Like, I just don't understand why people do it. There's no such thing as a free market. Yeah, read Free Market, The History of an Idea by Jacob Soll. Yeah, and the concept of a free market is a joke. The government always makes sure the market, like the government is always involved in the market. The idea that there is a market, the fact that there is a market at all is because of government intervention. Like there's no free market. Like it's a complete farce of an idea. Compton, as always. F the 60s, worker totalitarianism right now. I don't care if you don't understand it. Fair enough. C.R. Strifey, I think your criticisms of capitalism are totally valid, but I don't swing Marxism. I don't see how you can celebrate the economic success of countries and disregard it as it comes at the expense of personal freedom and autonomy. I don't see how you can celebrate the economic success of countries and disregard that it comes at the expense of personal freedom and autonomy. So, what can you get specific with this? Like, can you get specific with this statement? Like, what country are you talking about even? Because I often find that what people do is they have to acknowledge, so let's use China, because China's the obvious one, that you have to acknowledge the economic success of China. That China's economic success is widely due to its socialist views and its socialist structures. That it has lifted like 800 million people out of poverty. It's been so successful that the capitalists try to take credit for it, which is a joke. But so you have to acknowledge that exists. because it's obvious. It's like right there. But then you fall for like the CIA narratives. It comes at the expense of personal freedom and autonomy. Well, what expense of personal freedom and autonomy? What personal freedom have the Chinese citizens actually lost? What personal freedom and autonomy have the people of China actually discarded for this economic growth? Like the freedom to be drug addicted in the streets, the freedom to be under the boot of a capitalist, the freedom to have to sell yourself to the highest bidder. Are these the freedoms that we're supposed to cherish? The freedom to be forced to follow laws while you watch corporations break those very same laws? Like what freedoms have these people actually lost? Capitalism makes iPhones and McNuggets not what we need to survive. Well, and I'm not against the idea of making things like iPhones and McNuggets, right? But one wants to believe that under a proper system, like, capitalism ruins everything, right? So take the iPhone. The iPhone is a great example. So instead of creating an iPhone that is a solid unit that is repairable, that is very difficult to damage, that is easy to upgrade, that is cheap, or maybe not even cheap, but that is durable, instead of making that, what do they make? They make something that becomes obsolete immediately, that breaks as quickly as possible, that they force obsolescence on through updating, and that is completely unrepairable. This is your capitalist innovation right here. That the goal is not to make something that is good, it's to make something that makes money. And so with iPhones, you just force people to buy the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again as expensively as possible, right? So it's not that iPhones are bad, it's that capitalism makes iPhones bad. That instead of making one iPhone that is guaranteed to survive for 20 years and is easy to update and easy to repair, you buy one iPhone every year for 20 years because it breaks and it becomes obsolete the moment you buy it. Like, just absolutely brutal. Turner says, it's all well and good to shame capitalism when people profit, but you also have to look at it when people take the risk of a business and fail. Profits equal risk premiums. So capitalists, what's the risk that a capitalist takes? The most risk that a capitalist takes is that they might become a worker again. That's the biggest risk that any capitalist takes. But of course, the highest level capitalists, so the richest Canadian is David Thompson. The richest Canadian is David Thompson. David Thompson can never take a risk that will make him a worker ever again. It is impossible. Why? Because David Thompson owns 10% of everything. He owns 10%, 5 to 10% of every business that exists in Canada. He literally is tied to the market itself. That as long as the market continues to go up, his wealth will also increase. Under these circumstances, it is not possible for a capitalist to, quote unquote, take a risk. Workers take far more risks than capitalists. That when a business goes under, capitalists walk away with a bailout and continue being capitalists, while workers get thrown into the streets. So who's risking here? What's the risk that the capitalist is actually taking? Like when Swiss Bank takes a bunch of shitty bets on cryptocurrency, do they get thrown out into the street? No, they get a $200 billion bailout and get a kiss on the cheek and get called a good little boy. So when you start talking about risk, I just don't know what you're talking about. And I just don't think you know what you're talking about. Outlaw Barber, an absolute pleasure. Good to see you here, bud. The central banking families have enough money to shelter, feed, and clothe every human being on the planet, and they don't. Yep, that by itself. That by itself is enough for us to despise them. Bailouts for large corporations make my blood boil. Yeah, people need to get the stick for risks that don't pay off to incentivize chasing for the carrot. Yeah, but they don't. They don't. Hence the fascist nature of the system that we live in. They don't. They don't get the stick. Why? Because there's been a merger. There's been a merger of the business class with the government, with the state. And that merger of those two forces is fascism. Christopher Da Silva, absolute pleasure to see you here, bud. Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure to see you. John, do you think the F. Trudeau people would fall more in line with our ideas than run-of-the-mill neolibs who seem to be okay with the status quo? Yeah. I do, actually. That's why I go pretty soft on the convoy guys, right? The convoy people, which are, basically the F. Trudeau guys. That these people, their analysis of the situation is when they start describing problems, they sound like communists, right? That the system's doing this and they're that, and Trudeau's working for them with this and the collapse of this, and oh my God, we got on the housing prices and all of this, and yabba, 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 on they go. And I find myself going, absolutely, yeah, 100%, yep, absolutely, for sure. And then they start describing solutions, and their solution is basically, we need to sell ourselves to corporations harder. We need more corporate power. We need bigger, stronger, more powerful corporations to take more control of our lives, is essentially their solutions. And of course they wouldn't say it that way, but that's what they're arguing for. And so when it comes to describing the problem, they're bang on the money, which puts them well ahead of liberals, in my view. Because liberals still live in this delusional space where everything's fine, we just need to reform it a little bit. Right? At least the F. Trudeau people acknowledge that there's a problem and are seeking solutions to those problems. Their solutions are extremely bad. Extremely bad. And will backfire against them in ways that they can't even possibly begin to imagine. And their entire ideology, which is usually called libertarianism, can be disproven with a single game of Monopoly. Right? And so it's and the thing that keeps them in line and the thing that keeps them away from communism is very simply the trigger words of communism killed 100 million people of a iPhone. Just very dim-witted, slow, low-level stuff. Right? That straight up these guys have it programmed in their brain. And I say programmed on purpose because I think it is programming. That literally anything to help anyone for any reason whatsoever is 100 million people dead. That connection is just 1 + 1. Connect. Literally we should give any amount of money to poor people to help them get off the streets. 100 million people dead, communism. And it is exactly like that, and it is programming. I've said it over and over and over and over and over again, and I'm going to continue saying it until I've got the document to show you guys. I think the CIA is hypnotizing people with phones. I think that they are literally running programs. I think that they have AI running programs in order to hypnotize people and put trigger words into your consciousness. And you can see this happen. I understand this sounds conspiratorial, and I don't have the document to back it up. I'll be straight up with that. But from what I've seen, this is exactly what I think is happening. That if you ask a person, we've done polls on this, if you ask a person, hey, do you think that we should help the poor? 70% of respondents go, yes, of course, absolutely, we should help the poor. Absolutely. 70% of respondents say yes. If you say, hey, do you think we should give people welfare? Only 30% of the populace says yes. That means that that's a trigger word. That means that that's a trigger word that's 40% effective. That you can make 40% of the populace believe that giving money to the poor is bad if you use a trigger word. I think that people are being hypnotized by the CIA through these phones, and one day we're going to do a church commission, another church commission on the CIA, It's going to expose a bunch of stuff, and I'll hold the document in front of you. It'll be like Operation Pigeonhole, right? Operation Inception, Operation Dark Matter, right? And I'll hold it in front of you and be like, told you. I think it's absolutely happening, and I see it in these libertarian guys all the time. All the time. That you can talk to these guys about communist ideas. You can talk to these guys about those ideas. The second you say the word communism or Marx, they become irrational, foaming at the mouth flat earthers. They are not capable of holding a rational conversation because they're not interested in it, because they've been programmed to not be interested in it through these fucking phones. I'm dead convinced of it. To swing Marx, you have to read him. Yeah, I think that's right. You wouldn't be able to be on YouTube criticizing everything if you were in China. That's an example. Completely false. Easily falsifiable, CR Strifey. Like, easily falsifiable. You know how easy it is to falsify that? You can go onto Chinese TikTok, right? You can go onto Chinese TikTok and you can see people being critical of the state. Now, there are certain subjects that the government will definitely go after you about. For example, if you're a Taiwanese separatist, right? They're just not going to let that fly for obvious reasons that should be very obvious to you. But if you want to be critical of the state on Chinese social media, you can see them do it. You can watch them do it, right? Oh no, I can't browse 4chan in China, my personal freedom. Yeah. That needs to be embroidered on a pillow. Capitalism ruins everything. There's an idea, Mr. Moon. I could make a whole bunch of like pillow embroideries. Could make a whole bunch of adorable things that say capitalism ruins everything. With like a cute kitten on it. Well, I agree with helping the poor, though not through welfare, but through other ways, as in maybe free rehab facilities if they are addicts. I mean, nothing helps the poor more than money. Right? People don't need a handout, they need a hand up. It's as simple as that. Poverty is the state of having no resources. So give people resources. And the idea that people are going to blow it all on bullshit, there's just no evidence for this. There's straight up no evidence to support that idea. Like, oh no, a person bought a beer. Like, oh okay. Like, if you give people money, they use it to pay off debt. They use it to pay rent. They use it to stabilize their lives. That's what they use it for. Because people want to live in a stable condition. That's what they want. Radio programmed through phones and TV before that. Yeah, I mean, it is sort of this zombification, right? The zombification of the mind. Are we talking about Mark's never had a job? Sure. Like, I love that. Mark's never had a job. That's the funniest thing I think I've read all day. It's about blah, blah, blah. In that situation, the best play is bribing Trudeau to bring in millions of immigrants. I mean, increasing immigration is not a bad idea. Like, Canada is in a population decline. Like, if we're going to increase our economic capacity, it is going to be through immigration. Of course, the system of capital ruins everything, right? So it just enslaves these people, which is why more and more people are refusing to immigrate, right? Immigration numbers are actually down pretty significantly. I mean, you have the Muslim ban through the Trump years, and I think more and more people in these what we would call third world countries really view Canada and the United States as a threat, right? That lots and lots of people, I think, are starting to realize that they're better off just staying where they are. That the quote unquote better life that the capitalists in the West are offering is just a myth. It's just not real for them any longer. So they're just better off staying at home. Right? Staying where they are. Want that system grab 200 of your friends, buy a company, pay everyone the same, get back to us. I mean, that's essentially how Huawei operates. Like there's Mondragon in. There's plenty of examples of this. Like the reason why it doesn't happen is because the capitalist forces own the land, and they don't want you to do it. That if you walked into a bank to secure a loan for such an organization, they would just say no, because they understand that that's a threat, and they're not going to permit it. They're not going to permit it to persist. They're going to destroy it, and they're going to destroy it on purpose. Like the Western states literally go to countries and bomb them for doing what you're describing. They're not just going to allow you to do that here. And if they do allow you to, and if you do manage to get it done, it'll be to such a small scale and to such a small degree that it will not have an impact, right? Like they're not going to allow this competition to become serious or fair, and they will blow you up with bombs like they always have and will continue to do. Like it's a very strange world that these pro-capitalist people live in, where they somehow think that everything is voluntary and everything is operating above board, with all of the evidence to the contrary. Hello, Nova Scotia. How you doing, bud? Good to see you. Like, meanwhile, we're talking about the decline of Western civilization and the decline of capitalism. An article from the CBC. Households now owe more than Canada's entire GDP, housing agency warns. So I'm going to read that again, just so everybody understands. Households now owe more than Canada's entire GDP, housing agency warns. This system is unstable, that it will not be able to persist in this manner, that there are major collapses coming where we have taken out all of this debt and all of these loans that we simply are not going to be able to recoup, and we're simply not going to be able to recover. That the housing market is especially bad. The housing market, especially in Canada, is especially bad. That we have essentially allowed worthless, parasitical landlords to buy up all of the property and sit on it empty because they're treating it as if it is an investment. That it isn't a necessity for Canadians to have for their survival, but it is an investment. Thanks, Hazel. Join the Mennonite Collective. They should give you most of what you want. Because I'm sure the Mennonite Collective is just accepting outsiders, my man. Like, what is with this pseudo-genocidal shit? What is with this, like, oh, here's a person who wants to somewhat improve his society, let's relocate him. Like, it's pseudo-genocidal, right? Like, the forced relocation of political adversaries is genocide. Like, this desire to forcibly relocate people that you don't agree with is weird and odd and creepy. And I think it needs to be called out a lot more. Like, not only that, it's excessively stupid. Like, this is no way to solve a problem. This is no way to fix a solution. Like, this is no way to find a solution. This does not solve the issues of our society. This is not a serious thing to say. Santora, good to see you. Capitalists forgot their business leaders have no issue bombing civilians, so your little co-op needs much more to fight. Yeah. Baked Potato's absolutely right. Canadian housing is a joke. Keep them dumb, poor, and in debt. Yeah. Looking to see. I love this boot. I love this boot. Yep, the CMHC report is the second in as many weeks to sound the alarm on debt loads. The Bank of Canada's Financial System Review last week warned that the sharply higher cost of carrying a mortgage is a major risk to the economy in the coming years. The central bank has raised its benchmark lending rate aggressively in recent months as an attempt to bring down the record high inflation. This line right here is a joke, right? This line right here is the joke. The central bank has raised its benchmark lending rate aggressively in recent months in an attempt to bring down record high inflation. Inflation is literally corporations jacking prices. That's what it is. You can raise the interest rate all you like. The BlackRock and Vanguard have all the capital. They have all the capital. You can raise the interest rate as high as you like. All you're going to do, and all raising the interest rate does do, is chase out smaller players. Chase out smaller players. And if the smaller players are chased out, what does that do? Well, it gives cheap assets for who? BlackRock and Vanguard. So this idea that we're raising interest rates in order to fix inflation is a total fucking joke and should be considered as such. Greedflation, absolutely, Mike. Mike Hammer. That's a powerful name. I hope that's your real name, bud. I hope your real name is Mike Hammer. And if it isn't, you should make it your real name. That's a good, strong, powerful name. 1000%, good to see you, bud. Congress versus debt ceiling, June 6 to 9. If Congress doesn't pass, the collapse happens. So I think that this is a red herring. Like, straight up. Like, this whole debt ceiling conversation happens once every 5 years, right? Or however many years. It happens in a cycle, right? They've raised the debt ceiling 70 times in the history of the United States. What I think is happening this time around, and the reason why it seems like there's such a hysteria surrounding it, is that the ruling class knows that the currency is collapsing. It knows that the international community is no longer trading on the dollar, and it knows that the value of the dollar is going to plummet anyway. And so it needs to come up with a counter-narrative. It needs to come up with a counter-narrative for why that happened. And because if it doesn't come up with a counter-narrative, then the narrative will be the system of capital is a failure and needs to be replaced. And the Republicans and the Democrats are allies in this regard, that the system of capital needs to persist. And so they are trying to create a counter narrative. So instead of it being the system of capital is a failure and it needs to be replaced, the narrative is those pesky Republicans collapsed the economy, so we need to get rid of the Republicans. Vote Democrat. Man, those Republicans, man, they really made a shamble of this economy, eh? It certainly isn't the system of capital that should be replaced. It's just the Republicans. Vote Democrat. Keep voting. Vote harder. That's the grift as far as I can see it. Because the system of capital can't allow the narrative that the reason why the dollar has plummeted in value is because of the actions of capitalists on the world stage. You can't have that persist. You can't allow the people of America to recognize that it's the failure of capitalism. That you've got to create a counter narrative, and I think that the debt ceiling is exactly the narrative that they're using. Command Genius, absolute pleasure to see you, bud. Methane, good to see you, bud. Mike Hammer, wasn't that one of the dudes that made Venture Brothers or something? Wouldn't that be wild? I've got like literally the inventor of Venture Bros in my chat. That'd be hilarious. Greedflation isn't accurate. Ooh, Compton. It implies that capitalists are being hasty and behaving badly. What? Are we supposed to be okay with slow burn inflation? Fantastic, dude. Fantastic. Yeah, sun came up today. Thanks a lot, capitalism. Yeah, if it wasn't, you got it, Billy Bob. Billy Bob, I like you immediately, my man. That's exactly right. I'm going to start saying that to people. Like, capitalism's the reason the moon rotates around the earth and the tides come in and out. God bless you, capitalism. The sun rose today. Thank you, capitalism. Man, that's like a spoof character in like a cartoon. Just like a hyper-capitalist being like, if it wasn't for capitalism, we'd still be living in the dark. The sun rises every morning thanks to the Bank of America. God bless America. He like rides to work on an eagle, wearing a cowboy hat, holding a rifle. Command Genius says, I just watched a video by a TikTok ANCAP. Good start. Good start, Command Genius. Trying to, quote-unquote, prove that socialist governments are killing their citizens. Well, I looked at their source, which was a book called Death by Government. Oh, already a good start, dude. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. I'm really looking forward to the part 2 on this, dude. Because you've got TikTok ANCAP So already, like, we're dealing with somebody who really knows what's going on. Socialist governments killing their citizens. Okay, so that's a fun claim, like the classic claim. And their source, a book called Death by Government. Here, let's just do it. Let's just look it up. Death by Government and Mass Murder since 1900. Who is the author of this? Death by Government author. Death by... He's a book of numbers. Author Rummel. Who is this guy? R.J. Rummel. Like, author R.J. Rummel. Communism bad. Source my fan fiction. My fan fiction. Like, we're gonna find out that this guy. We're gonna find out that this guy is a Rudolf Rummel. Here we go. An American political scientist and professor at Indiana University, Yale University, and University of Hawaii. He spent his career studying data on collective violence and war. He's one of these people who's like, estimated a total of 212 million people were killed by all governments during the 20th century. Like, I bet you anything that if we actually peeled this back and took a look, if he deemed it a result of deliverable, as he did for the Holodomor, right? That what these guys do, and what they always do, if you actually peel back what it is that they actually do, is they take a look at, like, census data, right? They don't actually investigate the events on a historical way. That they just take a look at things like census data or population charts, and then they just interpret and adjust the numbers as they want, and then say that amount of people died, right? You can see it happen all of the time with these guys, and it's annoying. It's annoying, is what it is. That they're not actually using any kind of historical analysis, right? They're not actually using any kind of historical analysis. That they're doing like a retconning to get the numbers that they want based on an atrocity that they claim and state just exists in the first place. Like, you just say it happened, and then you find the evidence you want in census data that you manipulate to get the numbers that you want. Like, it happens so often that I'm positive that that's what this guy is doing. Like, Rudolf Rummel, that's a difficult name to take seriously. American dad character. Yeah, they said in the first chapter that 148 million died, then later in the book they said 200 million. At this point, you might as well just say a trillion. Like, they're just going to pick a number that's so outrageous. The Chinese government killed 100 bajillion people. Wow. Do you have a photo of it? No. Well, how did you come to that number? Well, I took a look at the census data and saw that there were slightly less people born this year instead of this year, and so it must have been a famine. Like, this is how they get these numbers. Like, that is, like, I know I said it stupidly, but that's actually what they're doing. Like, and we're all just supposed to mindlessly, stupidly go along with this. As if this is a serious thing. As if we're all, so you're telling me that millions and millions and millions and millions of people died, and nobody saw it, there's no photos of it, you don't have a grave, you don't have a body, but boy howdy do you have census data. Like, get out of here with this. Get out of here with this nonsense. It drives me crazy that we're supposed to constantly be debating these guys. We're supposed to constantly be talking about it. And I'm just to a point now where I'm like, sources, please. Like, get out of here. Like, get out of here. They also defended the Finnish government allying with the Nazis in the book. There you go. Right? Like, there you go. like there you go. Like, I'm so exhausted by this nonsense. By needing to constantly look at idiots trying to find evidence for their shitty propaganda, and us supposed to actually take this seriously. Like, the system of capital has lost all credibility. It no longer has credibility. That if a person is standing up and saying, oh, the Soviets or the communists killed 100 billion people. Okay, can I see a picture of it? Can I see an eyewitness account of it? Can I see literally anything else? Outside of just you futzing with census data, which is exactly what you're doing? Like, it's embarrassing, is what it is. And it's a big reason why the rest of the world is starting to see that the West has gone completely crazy. Because the West is not connecting to reality. It is not engaging meaningfully with reality anymore. It is making hysterical, outlandish claims with no evidence whatsoever in order to justify war. It's insane. It's insane. According to Rummel, it was to avoid an evil non-democracy invading the country because Stalin is an evil man that has to do war in every nation. Like, is this a quote? Is that actually a quote? You put it in quotes. Is that a quote? Because if that's what he wrote, then he's a child, right? According to Rummel, it was to just listen to it. Listen to what this actually sounds like. Okay, thank God that's not a quote. Because it sounds really babyish. It sounds incredibly babyish. Like, Stalin is an evil man that has to do war in every nation. What are you talking about? Like, what a just like absolute, like... The capitalist class and the capitalist system is not capable of actually engaging with reality. And more it's getting extremely obvious. It is the reason why the rest of the world is isolating America. That the rest of the world is isolating America on purpose. USSR was only communist for the first few months, if that long. I mean, that's the classic sort of debate, bud. I don't think that Westerners necessarily have the right to declare what is or is not communism. That perhaps the people who are actually running the project have a better right to declare what is or is not communism. Like, in my view, the Soviet Union was a project that was working as hard as possible to improve the quality of life for its own citizenry, while simultaneously preparing itself for an external war that it won. That the Soviets went after the kulaks, which are essentially the Confederates of their country, right? They got rid of this slave system that the kulaks were running through the collectivization system. They improved the quality of life for their citizenry, eliminated homelessness, created a universal education system. They were the first people into space. Like, they were the first people into space, you know? Like, the idea that communism didn't work in the Soviet Union, I think is a joke. I think it's a joke that Westerners tell each other. It's just a way for them to cope. Obviously, communism was successful. They took an agrarian country, literally peasants working under feudal kings, and they took that and turned it into an industrial superpower in the space of 20 years. They turned it into an industrial superpower capable of being the first people into space, and also an army so powerful that it defeated the Nazis. Like, I don't know what you need. Like, this whole persistent narrative that, oh, communism fails except, when it defeats the Nazis and puts people into space for the first time. But we were the first on the moon. USA! 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 Oh, how did we do that? By copying the Soviets. Like, what do you need? Like, this is so really, the projection is so real, Command Genius. Like, and he said the only reason the USSR was a superpower was because they had American tractors. And since they're living off of genocide and forced labor, like, the projection is super real, right? Like, which country is living off of genocide and forced labor? Isn't America, like, on First Nations land? Aren't Americans, like, colonizers occupying First Nations land? And, hey, what about that history of black slavery? Like, the projection is so real. Like, Westerners are so desperate to convince the entire rest of the world that other superpowers are just as bad as us. That sure, we did bad things, but so did they. And it's failing. It's failing. The rest of the world isn't believing it. They're not buying into it. Yeah, capitalists have never cared for true data except for the rate of profits and if those profits are theirs. Yeah, America's strong because it worked hard. Hard work, grind set. Yeah, but the First Nations accepted us to take the land. It was worth it because then the USA wouldn't be able to save democracy. Yeah, Soviet time capsules are super sad, dude. So full of hope and enthusiasm for the future. The saddest Soviet message I heard was, hello to the people who don't know war. Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one. Like, I don't know why when I'm supposed to discuss the Soviet Union, I'm not supposed to discuss Adolf Hitler as well. Like, the Soviets weren't the ones invading Europe, right? Like, there wasn't, like, a big, massive war push effort by Stalin and the Soviets. They were far more interested in resolving conflicts around themselves and protecting themselves against their historical adversaries. Like, it's just brutal. It's just absolutely brutal. Snake was able to have a persuasive conversation about Mao and the USSR with a friend, brought up the lack of evidence argument, and it was productive. Thankful for yesterday's stream. Glad to hear that, bud. Glad to hear that. Honestly, the lack of persuasive evidence is basically the whole thing. Like, anytime any of these capitalists start bringing up, like, 100 million people died during Mao's Great Leap Forward, I'm to the point where I'm straight up just like, can I see a photo of this? Like, that supposedly happened in the 50s, right? Like, when Leave It to Beaver is on TV, right? Like, there's televisions and shit. They've got planes that can take photos of the ground, right? Okay, so let's just say there wasn't somebody around with a camera. Okay, I can believe that. 100 million people dying, nobody with a camera. Okay. But certainly there must have been someone in the country who saw this happen. Certainly there must have been some sort of diplomat, some politician, some sort of ambassador, some sort of military person from the West who was in China and witnessed a famine that killed 100 million people. Certainly, it must be the case that anyone at any point during that period of time wrote down on a napkin that 100 million people are dying in a famine around me. This is a crisis. Oh my God. There's a refugee crisis where people are fleeing the country. They're digging mass graves and throwing them into graves. Oh my God. It's a total disaster over here. Oh my goodness. Certainly someone during that period of time must have been writing that down. No. Not even a sentence written on a napkin. No, nobody. Literally nobody during that period of time even mentioning the fact that there's a famine that's killing 100 million of people. Oh. Well, then where's this claim come from? Oh, it turns out that in the 80s, a couple of guys looked at some census data and fussed with the numbers and came up with 100 million people dead because, you know, the us fussing with data is the same as a photo. is the same as eyewitness accounts. Like, this is the lies that these people are willing to tell. This is the degree of lying that capitalists are willing to engage in. Under no circumstances whatsoever are you to believe a single thing that comes out of these people's mouths. That if they are standing in front of you with any kind of capitalist backing whatsoever, I don't care if they're running a lemonade stand. They are incredulous liars who will genuinely stand in front of you and tell you that 100 million people were killed. That is the scale of their deception and the incapacity for morality that they have. Do not believe them. Don't listen to the CIA. Don't listen to the State Department. Don't listen to the Pentagon, the presidency, the Congress, the Senate. Don't listen to Harvard, Yale. Don't listen to any of these guys, because they will stand in front of you and they will say to your face, 100 million people died, without a scrap of evidence. It's total bullshit. Isaac, good to see you, bud. America is a joke when they criticize other countries. They murdered our people and they need workers and enslave an entire race. Yeah. Also, Rummel said nothing about Hitler, so I guess Nazi Germany was a stable democracy, according to him. Yeah. Weird, eh? Weird how the guys that are standing up and accusing the Soviet Union of all kinds of things really downplay Hitler and the Nazis, eh? Really weird. Really weird when like guys like Jordan Peterson stand up and talk about how communism kills 100 million people. They don't really talk about Hitler, right? Not really interested in talking about the Nazis, right? Really downplay the existence of the capitalist Hitler. Yeah. 100 million people died, population never decreased during the Great Leap Forward. 100 million, once again, 1/6 of the population died. That didn't destroy the credibility of the Communist Party. Yeah, exactly. And like, they just don't talk. And my favorite thing that the capitalists will say in regards to this is, well, the communists kill people that talk about it, you know. So not only did they kill like 1/6 of their population, or like 1/10 of their population, or whatever number you want to put on that, right? Not only did they do that, they also have this overwhelming power and authority to purge the society of anybody who talks about it. Like, but China's going to collapse at any moment, guys. China's collapsing at any moment. They've got the overwhelming power to completely silence 1 billion people on the subject of 100 million people dying. But the Chinese Communist Party is going to collapse at any moment, guys. The whole thing's coming down at any moment. But yet we're supposed to believe anything that comes out of your mouth? Yeah, because I use sources. Because I back what I say with sources. That's the difference, not your business. Is that what I say is the truth. Because I use historical analysis and sources. And if you want to come over to YouTube and challenge me on any of these things that I have to say, I will back up everything I say with sources. That's the difference. That's the difference. Oh my God, Wish Vosh? Oh my God, no, I don't want to be an FBI snitch or a pedophile, so no thanks. Baked potato, we cheat, lie, steal, and kill former CIA director Mike Pompeo. Exactly. Like, they know exactly where they stand. They know exactly what they're doing. Isaac, did you see the millions of refugees pouring into Europe from the wars waged by the U.S. in the Middle East, where they have killed about 4 million since the 1990s? Exactly. Like, you don't have a crisis like this without a refugee crisis. Like, it's very straightforward stuff. It's very simple. If you kill 100 million people, you're gonna have 100 million more running. Like, like a lie like this really relies on the dim-wittedness of the listener. That you just have to have a kind of childish, like, daddy wouldn't lie belief of like, whoa, 100 million, whoa. And at no point are you standing there being like, that seems wrong. Like, probably not though, right? Like, so it sounds wrong. Like, 100 million people dying, no refugee crisis, no counterinsurgency movement, no internal civil war. The communists just managed to keep control of a crisis that was killing 100 million people. Seems wrong. Seems wrong. Like, was the membership of the Communist Party even 100 million people? Like, seems wrong. Yeah, and here's a good point Cotton brings up. 100 million people in China died and the West didn't take advantage of that? Your enemy is injured and down and you didn't deliver a killing blow? It's because America's so altruistic, Cotton. Don't you know that America exists on the world stage to spread liberal democracy through the world for the benefit of all humankind? That the people who are fighting against the spread of our pure and innocent voluntary capitalist liberal democracy are simply people who refuse to engage with the reality that ours is the superior system? That we here in the West have the manifest destiny to spread our goodness through the globe, and they're fighting against us because they hate us for our freedoms. They hate us for our freedoms, and they're jealous of the glory and the virtue that they're spreading through the world. They want power for themselves, and they are unhappy to see the freedom of liberal democracy spread across this holy land. And so no, Cotton, no, we would never take advantage of another nation when they are in their darkest times. We would extend a hand of friendship and lift them up into the warm embrace of capitalist liberal democracy. Like, straight up, right? Like, straight up. This is what they would say. This is the thing that they would say, right? Just get Glenn Beck to deliver that speech, and that's basically what they do. Thank you, Snake. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, end scene. Ugh. Command Genius. 100 gonzillion babies boiled in Peru. Rest in peace to all boiled babies. Oh, yes. Just like in Iran. They're just like throwing babies on the floor. I saw it. I saw it with my eyes. I'm certainly not a liar. I'm certainly not a CIA asset in a plant. I saw it with my eyes, for reals. Isaac, America allowed Nazis to get away. They went to the US, Canada, and South America. This is why they have Nazis in South America that back dictators like Pinochet and all the dictators in Latin America. Yeah, I'll make this statement until the day I die. The reason why America got involved in World War II at all is because the Soviets were winning. That the Soviets were winning and were pushing the Germans back, and the Americans knew, and Europe knew, that the Soviets were going to go to the coast. They were going to go all the way to Portugal. They were going to go all the way to Spain. They were going to go all the way to France. The Americans knew it, and they knew that if they didn't get involved and push to Germany to meet the Soviets at Germany, that the Soviets were going to take Europe. And that would be the end of the Germans. That would be the end of Germany. That would be the end of the Nazis. That would be the end of all of that. Moreover, it would actually also be the end of the banking system, right? And so they needed to salvage it. That's why they got involved. That's why they got involved. Where are your sources that it didn't happen? Where are your pictures that it didn't happen? Really think this one through, not your business. You can't prove a negative. You're the one making the claim. You're the one that needs to provide evidence. Source statements, claims that are made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So if your claim is that in China, 100 million people died, I would like to see some evidence. And if you can't provide evidence, then I can dismiss that claim. And that's exactly what's happened. Ooh, someone just typed in randomly Operation Paperclip. Ryan, good to see you, bud. Let's just look at Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from the former Nazi Germany to the U.S. for government employment after the end of World War II in Europe between 1945 and 1959. Conducted by the Joint Intelligent Objectives Agency, it was largely carried out by special agents of the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps. Many of these personnel were former members and some were former leaders of the Nazi Party. Normal country. Normal country. Yeah, where are your pictures that it didn't happen? I'll go and take a picture of China's land and then give you the picture of China. Be like, there you go. I guess. What's the source of the Soviet Union takeover of Europe? I've never heard this before today. It's what they were doing. Like they were just going that way. Like well, you thought that they were going to just stop at Germany? Nah, blood. Nah. The Soviets were going for blood, dude. Like, come on. Like we don't need to limit our imagination to what the CIA has to tell us. Right? Like if not for the United States involvement, if not for the fact that the Soviets meet the Americans, boom, at Germany, at Berlin, right? They're going. Like, are you kidding me? Why would they stop? If the Americans aren't there, give me a reason. Why are they stopping? They're going to the coast. Like, they're going. And the only reason why this idea doesn't find traction in the American consciousness is because we genuinely want to believe that we're good. We're not. Snake says... Santora says, nah, I believe your speech more than anything they do. Fantastic. Snake, I talk about Paperclip a lot, and my more liberal-leaning friends just shut down. They don't know how to engage with it. Yeah, you know what? I really didn't expect that when the Ukraine war started. And I want to pull this document up so that I actually have, because I get in a lot of trouble for talking about this. Ottawa Citizen, Canadian military funding Nazis. Yeah, here's a good one. This is from the Ukrainian. The Ottawa Citizen. Right. This is this is an article published by the Ottawa Citizen. Canadian officials who met with Ukrainian unit linked to neo-Nazis feared exposure by news media, from the documents. And if you read the source, if you read Ottawa Citizen, you'll see that they say the Canadians met with and were briefed by leaders from the Azov Battalion on June 2018. The officers and diplomats did not object to the meeting and instead allowed themselves to be photographed with battalion officials, despite previous warnings that the unit saw itself as pro-Nazi. The Azov Battalion then used those photos for its online propaganda, pointing out the Canadian delegation expressed hopes for further fruitful cooperation. So this is the Ottawa Citizen reporting that Canadian officials, including military personnel, met with Ukrainian neo-Nazis in the Azov Battalion. You can find the article online. It's easy to find. This is not me saying this. This is the Ottawa Citizen. Please do not ban me for reporting on what the Ottawa Citizen reported TikTok. Thank you. I appreciate and value sources. I use information and evidence. So this is what the Ottawa Citizen reports. If you show this to liberals, they shut right down. They cannot engage with this, right? They can't. This is a big reason why the like rah Ukraine narrative still persists, is because they cannot compute this. And when I first interacted with that, when I first engaged with that, I didn't expect it. I think it's because I'm so steeped in it. I'm so steeped in it all the time that when I found this, I was shocked, I'll admit. Like, I was like, oh, wow, this is how far we've degraded. Like, this is how far we've declined. That we are literally meeting with and funding neo-Nazis. So says the Ottawa Citizen. This is how far we've declined. But when I try to talk to people about it, it is a wall. They cannot, it cannot enter their thinking pattern. Because I think that most people understand intrinsically that if they were to accept this as reality, if they were to accept this as a fact that was actually something that was real, that was actually happening in the world around them, that they would actually have to do something about it. Because the question when we were growing up, I know I was asked this question several times by several different people. What would you have done if you were living in Nazi Germany? What would you have done if you were living in Nazi Germany? And now you know. Now you know. You know exactly what you would have done. You're doing it now. My only problem is the white dudes in charge of stuff with no set cycle of change. Yeah? I deal with communism to a point. I just want to chill in a cabin farming and trading my stuff. Yeah. Fairly understandable. I think that you would love what they did in Vietnam, bud. In Vietnam, literally every citizen was just given a plot of land. That's straight up. Like, if you were a Vietnamese citizen, you just got a piece of land. There's a great YouTube commentator by the name of Luna Oi, and Luna Oi owns a parcel of land in Vietnam because of this, where she just grows rice and just lives off of the land in Vietnam. So I think you'd be pretty happy with what the Vietnamese did in that regard. Soviets would have taken Japan also. That's the real reason they were bombed. Yeah, I could somewhat believe that idea, like that the Soviets were sort of looming on the doorstep of that. So I tend to, yeah, I mean, would the Soviets have been successful? Like, it's impossible to deny that the Soviets weren't interested in it, obviously, but like, would they have been successful? I mean, certainly America needs to get involved. Sorry, I'm just messing with my hair. The question, I think it's always funny whenever we get into like human rights conversations. Like, America is the only country in the world that has bombed civilian targets. Like, America lost its credibility at the end of World War II. Like, nuclear bombardment of civilian targets is indefensible. That the Truman Doctrine was basically, we had to drop those bombs or else more of our people would die in the ensuing war trying to go in and take Japan. That was the argument. But the Japanese were surrendering. Like, they were drawing up surrender documents already. So the idea that we needed to go in there and take the island is a joke. We absolutely didn't need to do that. And there's plenty of evidence to show that the bombing that we were doing to Japan conventionally was just as destructive as the nuclear bombardment. That I view the nuclear bombardment of Japan as a threat to the Russians. That, look at what we're willing to do. Look at what we're willing to do. If we'll do it to them, we'll do it to you. Take us seriously. Yeah, and if we do, but if you do, then, well, why are they acting so strangely? I don't understand. Are they afraid that we'll drop nukes on them the way that we did before? Yeah, capitalism is generational tyranny for sure. Only mistake Stalin made was stopping at Berlin and banning homosexuality again. Yeah. Liberals love to point that out. Like, yeah, Stalin was not a perfect person. I'll say it over and over and over and over and over again, though, that this whole rainbow imperialism thing that's going on, that what we need is gay generals, right? It's going to backfire, and it's going to backfire in a big way. That any LGBTQ movement of any sort any uh, 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 any movement, any rainbow coalition movement of any sort needs to be explicitly anti-imperialist. Because what the rest of the world is doing is that they are rejecting LGBTQ rights because it is connected to imperialism. And they are using imperialism as the justification to reject it. So, I'm quite concerned about that. But I feel like it's unreasonable to say that people should adopt our ideology while we drop bombs on them. Wasn't the homosexuality thing a criminalization of acts of pedophilia? I mean, yes, but also, right? Like, people like to pretend, but like, it's not like America was like pro-gay at that time either, right? Like, Stalin's views of homosexuality was right in line with everybody else's. So, mass formation psychosis is a powerful drug, absolutely. Yeah, it confronts their worldview, for sure it does. In a big way. Like, in a big, big way. So they've got to just black it out. They've just got to blank it out. They just cannot grip it. They can't grapple it. Yeah, remember, America is a colonial power. We have Libya, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Hawaii. Not to mention America itself. You know, like Texas, California. Canada are junior imperialists. We follow America into all their dirty wars. I wouldn't be surprised if they're controlling our economy and government covertly. I mean, they don't really need to, right? Like, they don't really need to. The idea that, like we're willing participants, you know. You don't need to like do like the what is it, the Manchester candidate or the Manchurian candidate. You don't need to do that, you know, when you have such willing participants. That basically, if CSIS stands up, and CSIS is basically just junior CIA, if CSIS stands up and says something, all of the parties basically go, CSIS said it, yeah, anyway, and there's no pushback. Like, there's no anti-CIA or anti-American movement of any sort. There isn't a single seat held by a single person who is willing to stand up and say out loud, maybe the CIA is untrustworthy. Right? That should tell you basically everything you need to know about our system of government. That there isn't a single legislator anywhere, in the Senate, in the House, at the premiership, in any city anywhere, that's willing to stand up and say, maybe we shouldn't believe everything we're told by the CIA and CSIS. Right? That the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives, every single time somebody stands up and says, every single time the CIA or CSIS stands up and says something is true, everybody just goes, that's true. It's a total joke. It's a total joke. So you don't need to control the economy and the government covertly when you have such willing participants who are just going along with it like trained seals. Isaac says the West decided not to follow the Minsk agreements so they can have time to train the Ukrainian neo-Nazis and wage war against Russia, according to Angela Merkel. Canada trained many of them. Yep. And, like, I've seen Putin talk about this, and he admits that this is a mistake. Like, one of the things that I keep talking about, and it's classic amongst Russian leaders, that Russian leaders constantly give the West the benefit of the doubt, and they shouldn't. Like, that it's a constant refrain that Soviet leaders did, and Russian leaders are constantly looking at the West and being like, well, they're capable of reason. No, they're not. The West is a rabid dog. It cares about one thing and one thing only. Content, Stalin was a liberal. Evidence, he stopped at Berlin. Command Genius, Stalin should have pushed into Italy. We would have gotten more economically sustainable south. The only parties I've seen that actually try to disagree with CSIS are two communist parties. Yeah, pretty ironic. I mean, that's not... Is it ironic? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I understand what you mean. Hot take, I think Watch Dogs Legion is a better cyberpunk aesthetic than Cyberpunk 2077. How dare you, sir? I think that cyberpunk is like fantasy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like fantasy futurism. That it's not really capturing what the aesthetic would be like. Dude, get out of here. Get out of here, bud, with this. Get out of here with this. Although I do see what you're saying. The like sort of cartoonish, absurd, like the pig head, the skulls, just the absolute ridiculous nonsense. That's something that I think is actually true. Like, I think that cyberpunk was sexy. That's it. Like, cyberpunk was sexy. They took all of these ideas and all of like what the future is looking like, and they made it like sexy and cool and sleek, and everything, you know, kind of worked, and everything was sort of normal. Whereas this just looks stupid, and I'm like, yeah, that seems more correct, right? That's more correct. It really was, but when you really stop and think about it, the sci-fi was maybe cranked up a bit too much. Yeah, absolutely. Like, literally in Cyberpunk, a person could just take their arm off and put on a robot arm, and it completely worked in a day, right? Like, that's fantasy. Like, that's fantasy. That's not going to happen. That's not how that's going to be, right? But there are things that I actually think are pretty attainable, and that we are actually closer to than I think people realize. Like, in Cyberpunk, the brain dance, right? That you put on a piece of equipment and then it takes you into another form of reality, and you interact with that reality, and it interacts with your brain completely. I think that we're actually within reach of that. Like, I think that that's attainable. And there's nothing like sleek or sexy about it. Like, I think that we're going to be able to do that within my lifetime. If there is a group of people out there working on it now. Snake says, in my opinion, how should communists behave or uphold themselves? Dude, that's such a huge question, man. Like, that's actually like a really big fucking question. That's like getting to some like religious territory right there. Like, I think you should always tell the truth. I think that you should never exploit someone. That you should always be willing to help someone if they need help. You should always be looking out for someone else. You should always give people on the street money if you have it. You should understand that the people around you are also being exploited. You should understand that the people around you are also experiencing the degradation of capital, and that they might treat you badly, or they might be in a place that is dark, but that you shouldn't take that personally or judge them too harshly, because they are acting from a place of being exploited by the system of capital too. And so that comes with a great deal of understanding, I think. Understanding that another person is also suffering through it. And that letting people know that it's okay. It's okay. That they don't need to hide. That they don't need to keep up appearances or keep up a brave face. That you're not going to judge them for being a human. That you're not going to think poorly of them for struggling under the system of capital. I think that's the most important thing. That we operate with solidarity with one another and forgive each other for our human frailty and our human weaknesses. And do what we can, to the degree that we can do it, to uplift one another. That capitalists often talk about handouts. Well, we need to be talking about hand-ups. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to give people a handout. We're trying to give people a hand up. So I think that's the most important thing. Just love everybody. You know? That I genuinely believe in my heart of hearts that if you were to watch someone's life story, it wouldn't matter who. If you were to watch someone's life story, even if they were unrepentant and incapable of repentance, you would understand them and you would even love them. That every person who's ever walked the earth, if you could watch their life story, you would love them by the end of it. And for some people, that would mean literally watching every moment of their life. So of course it's not possible. But I strongly believe that that's how it would be. That you would watch their life and then you would love them. And so I just say skip to the end and love them anyway. Start by loving them. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Because they're struggling too. Let them earn your ire. Let them earn your suspicion. And unless they're capitalists, then fuck them. That's a conversation that we could have for hours, I think. This whole stream could be about that very thing. I think Batman Beyond got Cyberpunk the best. Classic. Conton says, I'm dead serious. Play it and find out. I'm not kidding. You know what, man? I can't play first-person shooters anymore. I don't enjoy them anymore. When I was younger, I used to really be into them, right? And I used to be pretty good at them, in fact. But I've played them now in my older age, and I just don't enjoy them anymore. And part of the reason why I don't enjoy them anymore is because I'm older. And I don't have the reflexes. I don't have the... my eyesight's not as good. I can tell that I'm not as crisp. I'm not as clean. I'm not as good as I once was. Same thing with third person, though. And so because of that, I find it difficult to enjoy. Which actually, like, and I know it sounds really childish to say, but it is true. I actually grieved quite a bit. I actually became quite upset when I realized that I was going to lose these types of games. That these types of games were not going to be something that I could do anymore. And the final nail in the coffin was the new Doom franchise. That I was actually quite excited about the new Doom franchise. Doom was a really important game for me in my youth, and I started playing the new Doom game, and I couldn't continue with it. And I've noticed that with things like John Wick. That John Wick, I can't watch John Wick. That it's too much. It's too aggressive. It's too fast. It's too there's too much happening too quickly, and I can't stay with it, and I lose. I literally cannot look at it. I have to look away. Yeah, I have to look away. And I have a similar thing that's happening with Mortal Kombat, another game franchise in my youth that was like very important to me. That I can't really keep looking at that game. That I find that I have to look away. And it's starting to give me psychic damage. And like maybe that was fine when I was a kid and I had like infinite energy or whatever. But I'm old now, and I don't have it. And so I move on to other things. The game I'm playing right now is Age of Wonders 4. You want to talk about a nice, relaxing, chill experience that you can look at for a long time? Age of Wonders 4. It's a beautiful game. It's probably one of the best 4X games ever made. It's turn-based, so it's all just nice and slow and steady as she goes, nice and chill. You can literally like watch TikTok videos and then play a turn, you know? And but like I am finding that like a lot of these like first person shootery type fast paced go kind of games I just can't connect with anymore, and I'm bummed about it. It doesn't make me happy, but that's life, baby. That's life. You know, you lose everything eventually. You lose everything eventually. Yeah, the West is doing in Ukraine what they did in Georgia in 2008, but nobody cared there because they're brown. Well, I also think there was a big financial crisis happening in 2008, right? Most people's attention was focused on the internal crisis. I'm not suggesting Cyberpunk failed aesthetically. I just think Watch Dogs stuck the landing a bit better. Yeah, cool, bud. I don't think I'm going to end up playing Watch Dogs, honestly. John, what are your thoughts about a techno-utopian AI communist overlord? At this point, I'm willing to try anything, bud. I think that it is actually completely possible that an AI could be used to distribute resources in a way that would be successful. But we would have to actually own that AI for the benefit of the people and the benefit of the populace. Right? Like, I think it's completely possible that, like, a governing body could be like, oh, we need to come up with a solution to resource distribution of, let's say, lithium or something. Let's use an AI to figure this out for us. And that they do. And, like, oh, we need giant agrarian systems to make sure that food is coming in. Let's use an AI to organize this. Right? I think that that's completely possible. That's not how it's going to be used. Right? That the AI is obviously bought by it's owned by capitalists, and so it's being used for all the scummy, shitty reasons that capitalists do things. For money. Right? Like, we're gonna get AI girlfriends. Like, we're gonna get AI stock market traders. Right? We're gonna get all of the shitty, scummy, dumb reasons that capitalists do everything. Right? That's what AI is gonna be used for. That AI will be used for military targeting systems. That AI will be used for war simulations. AI will be used for high-frequency trading. AI will be used to assess the cost-benefit analysis of a war in a region. Right? These are the reasons why AI will actually be used under a capitalist model. That the capitalists aren't going to give us an AI in order to improve the quality of our lives. The only reason we will have access to any AI whatsoever is to improve the quality of life or improve the bank accounts of the capitalist class. There is no such thing as an AI society in capitalism that equals a benefit to the society of any sort. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a toy. Like, anytime I interact with ChatGPT, and not a very good one. Like, that's the other part about it. Everybody's jerking off about this AI, but it's all just like internal. Like, we are jerking off at what it might be. But if you actually like play with the thing for even a moment, you get bored of it really quick because it's not very interesting, right? This to me is my highest criticism. That if I say this, and I really need people to understand this, if I say this, I think that there is no more crushing criticism that can come out of my mouth than this. That I find it to be quite boring. That I interact with it for a minute and I find it to be tedious. I find it to be annoying. I find it to be restrictive. I find it to constantly be trying to reassure me of things. I don't think it knows that much. I don't think it's particularly creative. I think it's capable of creating one thing in many different configurations. It's a toy for us to play with that is kind of boring and that we'll get over very quickly. And all of this, oh, but what it could possibly be is probably not going to happen for 20 years. So I find this whole AI craze to just be another way for capitalists to sell products. Oh, buy this stock. This stock you'll never believe. It's just another kind of cryptocurrency thing. And all of this, like, what you do is you take Jordan Peterson and you put him in a room and have him go, oh, we should all be very scared of what's going on with AI. And then you put a, like, soundtrack over it. And everybody goes, oh, I got to get in on the ground floor of that. We got to make sure that we're putting all our money into that. And maybe we should put money into security systems and AI. And oh my God, and it's a big kind of thing. And it's just another Elon Musk going to Mars scam. Like, I don't believe that AI is going to take us all over. You know why? Because I don't trust what these people say. And every time I interact with ChatGPT and all of this AI shit, it looks stupid, it sounds dumb, and it's boring. The only thing it seems to be good at is games like chess. Like, that kind of pattern recognition sort of thing, that's what it seems to be good at. Like, when I watch an AI play chess, it is definitely good at that. And so, what it would be good at? War simulations. Right? And that's what it's going to be good at. It's going to be good at creating conflict and finding your way through war. And that's what people will use it for, because that's who we are. Snake says, amen, sorry for the heavy question, but it was a great answer. It is empathetic and edifying duty in my mind. Yeah. Like, at base, what communism is saying is that your life is just as valid as mine. That one of the great gaslightings of our time is when capitalists say, when we say we're here for equality, and then capitalists say, oh, but some people are very tall, and some people are very some people are very tall, and some people are very short. We're obviously not the same, right? There are differences. Here are the differences. Because they're purposefully, intentionally missing that when we're talking about equality, we're talking about the equality of validity. We're not talking about the equality of capability. We're talking about the equality of validity. That your life and my life are equally valid. That Elon Musk's life and a person with no legs and no arms sitting in a wheelchair, their lives are equally valid. That the existence that they have was given to them by powers that far supersede ours, which is the universe itself. And that both of our existences are equally valid and need to be equally cherished and equally cared for. And if we're not going to be willing to do that, then therein lies the road to fascism. Because the moment you agree, the moment that you say that someone else's life is less valid, then you're on the path for getting that person out the door faster. Then you're on the path for justifying why that person gets to go to the gas chambers and you don't. Methane says, I only played about 20 minutes for Age of Wonders 4. Haven't got into it yet, but it's difficult for me to really get into those types. And where it's the opposite for me. I find those types of games to be very excellent. I really like 4X games generally. I think Age of Wonders 4 is especially interesting because of the role-playing aspect of it, the fantasy aspect of it. It's like right now, I'll literally like play a character. I'll literally be a character while I play it. Like here's an embarrassing admission. Here's me being a total fucking nerd in front of you guys. I'll play Age of Wonders 4, and right now I'm playing as a goblin who is his mastery is materia, so he's all about money, right? So a goblin who's mining everywhere. He sends scouts all over the place to prospect and mine the hills and all this kind of stuff. And he talks like this. He does. His name is Gordon Glittergold. If it glitters, it's gold. And all of his decisions are based around what's going to make me the most money. And every time he goes to war, he's like, well, war is good for business. And he makes peace, and he goes, well, peace is good for business. Gordon. Yeah, he's a fun time. And that's what I love about Age of Wonders 4, right? Is that it's a great game in its own right from like a min-max kind of wargaming perspective. But you get to be a character. There's a real character aspect of it. And to answer that, did I play Planetfall? I just wasn't attracted to the sci-fi stuff, like the guns and all that. I'm not attracted to it. And but I think if you are attracted to that, then you're really going to enjoy it. Seems to me like the people who enjoy Planetfall really enjoyed Planetfall. So it's just not my game, not what I was in for. I want the fantasy. I want the magic. I want to be able to throw a fireball at somebody. I want to be able to like raise undead armies. I want to be able to have like golems and shit. Like that's awesome. That's really, really awesome. Content, I feel like this new Mortal Kombat might be the last one I play. It's way too graphic for me. Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Content. You know what it is? You know what it is with the Mortal Kombat series is that they have included now like a special move that is like a cutscene, basically. So if you're fighting and then you pull off this special move, it's a fatality. You basically do a fatality to someone, but it's a special move that just does damage. And then the game continues. And so they've built into the very fabric of the fighting part of the game itself gore. That if you don't use, you are a worse player. And so in previous iterations of Mortal Kombat, if you were in a place where you're like, I'm not really in for the gore, like, sure, there's like red blood going off or something, right? Like it's, yeah, you know, but it's not like intestines coming out and like skin burning off and bones cracking and shit. If you weren't in for that, you could just not do the fatality, right? You just wouldn't do it. And you're just like, yeah, okay, like moving on with my life. Like, and the fighting is really like normal as far as fighting games go. Like really, when you're playing Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter, the only difference is that Mortal Kombat has like red coming out, like blood coming out. But it's just like red, like it, and the things that are happening are so unbelievable and so unrealistic that you can't really buy into the idea that this is truly happening. But then they've introduced these like X-ray things, so you hit a guy in a specific way 3 times, and it like X-rays into their chest, and you watch all their bones shatter. You know, or like their spleen breaks in half, or their balls burst. That's literally something that you get to see in Mortal Kombat 11. Is there someone's balls bursting? You know, or like a knife going into someone's eye. You know, and it's just like, and to me, it's the fact that they've made it unavoidable. That it's built into the structure and fabric of the gameplay itself now. Whereas previously it wasn't. That if you wanted that gore, if you wanted to get to there, then it was in the fatality section. That you would win the combat and then you would do the fatality, and that's where the gore came in. And so now, whenever you play Mortal Kombat, the entire time you're playing, you've got to have it in your brain, you've got to be braced, and you have to have a psychic shield up. Or you need to have the defenses up so that you know you're going to see this kind of thing. Because seeing that kind of stuff gives you psychic damage. There's just no two ways about it. If you see that kind of thing, it gives you psychic damage, right? Whether you accept that or not, it's true. You take psychic damage when you see that kind of gore. And so if you're going to play a game like that, you've got to have your shields up all the way, right? And that's exhausting. And so it's difficult to play. Whereas in previous iterations, you only needed to brace and have your shield up for a very short window, which is when the game ends. And if your enemy's the guy that has the chance to do the fatality, you can be like, okay, shield up. Oh, you didn't do it. Or shield up. Okay, here we go. And then you take it, and then off you go to the races, right? So I think that's what's done it for me. Is that, like, I'm not necessarily against video game violence or gore or any of that kind of stuff. It's an interesting conversation to have. And one day I would actually like to have it with somebody who is like, video game violence is the decline of human civilization, that kind of thing. Because I'm not necessarily convinced of that, but but you do take psychic damage it is difficult to constantly have that shield up, and Mortal Kombat 11 is constant with it. Like it's just a constant stream of it. Whereas previous iterations, it's just been at the end. It's just been fatality. Like, that's it. Sounds like a true capitalist. Yeah, gold and glitter gold. Yeah, everything he does is for gold. Now, so I've taken over your city, I have. Do I want to vassalize it? No, I think I'll burn it to the ground and crush it into gold. I love him. I love him a lot. He's a great character. I still love RTS games like Civ. Yeah. Civilization is not an RTS game. Civilization is a 4X game. RTS games are Age of Empires is an RTS game. Actually, Snake, Civilization is the RTS game. Speaking about video games, I'm almost finished making a Heart of Iron 4 mod that improves the historical accuracy of the USSR and makes the Nazis not seem as epic. Yeah, Heart of Iron 4 is like really, if you're playing a lot of Heart of Iron 4, I get a really like, oh, interesting, you're playing Heart of Iron 4, eh? Oh, you're playing as the Nazis, are you? Oh, interesting. Fucking Nazis. Did you play Heroes of Might and Magic 3? I think you had to, didn't you? When you were growing up, I think everybody had to play Heroes of Might and Magic 3 at one point. I think it was actually part of the video gamer's creed that if you hadn't played Heroes of Might and Magic 3, then you weren't a real gamer, right? Like, everybody had to take a crack at this. And Age of Wonders 4 uses Heroes of Might and Magic 3 as a template for sure. There's a lot going on in that game that you can really look at Heroes of Might and Magic and be like, okay, they pulled this from Heroes of Might and Magic for sure. Snake, I don't know, combos will ruin someone really quick. Fatal strikes are seen as amateurish in the community. Don't mean to be contrarian. No, I'm not trying to say that fatal strikes are bad or that they're good or bad for any kind of gameplay reason. I'm just saying that by their very existence, they introduce a level of gore into the game that didn't previously exist. I always preferred Soul Calibur or anything else other than MK. Didn't enjoy Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct was a good one. The new Street Fighter looks really good. I was always more of a Mortal Kombat fan than a Street Fighter fan, but the new Street Fighter looks really, really good. And I think that if Mortal Kombat is going to continue down this line of like really ramping up the gore and really doubling into the gore, then I think if I want to keep playing fighting games, I got to move on to something else. And Soul Calibur was always pretty good. Tekken was always fun. I played a lot of Killer Instinct, actually. I played as the wolf character. I forget his name. Yeah, I agree. It's quite brutal. Wish Mortal Kombat didn't have human characters. I was saying to a friend. Yeah, like, and to me, there's also something about the fact that the graphics have gotten so good and things are getting really specific now. That like back in the day, like Mortal Kombat 1, right? A fatality was like, I punched his head off, but it's just like a photo. So it's like more like your imagination really interacting with it. Or like Scorpion pulls off his mask and he has a skull head and he blows fire and then you're a skeleton, right? And it's all very like cartoonish. It has a kind of Looney Tunes quality to it. Like, go back and actually watch the fatalities from Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, 4. They all have like a Looney Tunes sort of quality to it. That the violence is like it's like a WWE kind of violence where you're just like, oh yeah, fire breath. I tear you in half, right? And like all the gore is just like red paint and like blobs of flesh that are not really. But now things are incredibly specific. right? And and some of these fatalities are extremely specific. I think the one that really made me turn away from the game a lot was a lot of Devora's stuff. Devora is like an insect creature who will like literally like spit insects into your body, and then the insects will eat you from the inside out. It's incredibly grotesque. Like, it's incredibly grotesque. And like, I'm not, I'm not against this idea. Like, horror is an aspect of our media, and it's an aspect of our lives, and the horror genre having that kind of stuff. And Mortal Kombat is part of that horror genre, certainly. But now it's so ubiquitous, and it's so specific, and it's so right in front of your face all the time that it's exhausting. It's just too much. It's too much. It's like why I can't watch John Wick films. Because, like, I enjoy martial arts, and I enjoy it. It's just like a constant thrum of just like... You know? It's too much. I'm too old. Interesting trivia about Mortal Kombat. In the very first game, Liu Kang didn't have a fatality. His finisher was just a very elaborate knockout move. The screen didn't even go dark during his finish. Yeah, because he was supposed to be the good guy, right? Snake. I am an Injustice fan. Injustice, yeah. It's mostly Superman started off as socialist in 1937. Liu Kang is the current Elder God in the new one and remade the universe, from my understanding. That's correct. Yeah, the plot of Mortal Kombat is just like way off the rails. Like, they don't even they don't care. Like, they don't care at all anymore. They're literally just like, yeah, we're gonna introduce Kronos, the time god, and she's just gonna be able to create multiple timelines, and who cares? So there's a timeline where Liu Kang wins, there's a timeline where Katana wins, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's no lore. Whatever you think happened is what happened, you guys. But yeah, like, Kung Lao table sawing people with his hat was like, absolutely, like, CR Strifey, first Mortal Kombat movie in the 90s is called. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right on the money with that, bud. If you want to absolutely enjoy the rest of your evening, guys, you go find Mortal Kombat 2 right now and really, really have a nice time watching an absolutely terrible movie. Just an absolute abomination that should never have been made under any circumstances whatsoever. One of the best fighting games was One Must Fall, 2097. Love that game. Wow, I've never heard of that game. I can't believe it. One Must Fall. I've never heard of this game. What are you talking about? What system was this for? This looks like a Dreamcast, right? That's probably why. Is this a Dreamcast game? Who here remembers Clay Fighters? Anybody? Anybody? Who here remembers Clay Fighters? Clay Fighters. Yes. Clay Fighters for the Super Nintendo, dude. Super Nintendo was the greatest. It was absolutely, like, for real, and I'm actually deadly serious about this. Every single person should download a Super Nintendo emulator and a ROM and download the entire anthology of Super Nintendo games and just have, like, the greatest time. There are so many really excellent games. You know what, Santora? You're not the first person to say this. I will die on this hill. Best fighting game I ever played was Smash Brothers Melee for the GameCube. You're not the first person I've heard say that. uh, and it's hard. I think it's in the fight. I think it is. Like, if you want to talk about like, if you want to talk about some of the best fighting games out there, Smash Brothers games have got to be in the mix, right? Yeah, what kind of crack were they smoking when they made Clay Fighters, dude? For sure, dude. Like, for real. Like, what the hell is this game, right? Like, I just think that they were really excited by claymation. I think that they were just excited that they could make like little clay figures fight with one another. And also they were spoofing Mortal Kombat clearly. Like, you've got claytalities, right? Like, I just think that they were excited by the fact that they could make something like this. And so they did. That's what I think it was. That before the Super Nintendo came along, this type of game could not have existed. And then it came along and they were like, oh shit, we can make this. Let's make it. Let's go. It's so stupid. And boy, is it ever stupid. Boy, is it ever stupid. But it's a stupid good time is what it is. Yeah, sadly missed the boat with Smash Brothers. Wasn't playing consoles then. Yeah, can't vibe with Smash Brothers. I don't get it. Yeah, I do think there's that. That's how I feel about Pokemon. I don't get Pokemon at all. Like, I like the whole gotta catch it all thing. I'm just like, I don't care. Like, you take a look at Pikachu and they're like, oh, I love Pikachu. And I'm just like, what, this little rat? This little yellow rat? Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim. He's such a groovy guy. What's there to understand? Enter this ring and fight. Yeah, Centaura. I think you've nailed it, right? Fight to the death as a little rat. Be a little plumber wearing a red hat. Destroy your enemies. Don't you want to be Star Fox? I don't know why, but every single time I end up playing a game of Smash Brothers, I end up being Bowser. I don't know why. Like, he's not great. Like, Bowser's not the greatest character, but I just connect with Bowser, I guess. I don't know I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it. It's just how it is. All right, guys, this seems like a fine point to stop. I gotta go use the bathroom anyway, right? Those Japanese. Always remember, guys, you're a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaire class is spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're gonna need it.